In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a dazzling theft rocks the glamorous riverside bungalow, where actress Sylvia Vane claims a masked intruder stole her priceless sapphires during a glittering party. But Miss Jane Marple, with her sharp eyes and gentle wit, sees through the actress's tears, unraveling a web of deception woven with smudged footprints, a wiped window, and a hidden jewel case key. As motives of greed, ambition, and betrayal surface among Sylvia's charming co-star, a bitter rival and a nervous insurance agent, Miss Marple exposes a staged crime where the real prize isn't the jewels, but fame and fortune. Will the truth shine before the curtain falls? Chapter 1. The sparkle of scandal. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over St. Mary Mead, where the roses in Miss Jane Marple's garden bloomed with quiet defiance against the fading season. From her armchair by the open window, Miss Marple's delicate hands moved with rhythmic precision, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a pale pink shawl. The village was still, save for the occasional chirp of a sparrow or the distant clatter of a milk cart, but the air carried a faint undercurrent of excitement, a ripple of gossip that had drifted from the nearby town of Much Benham, Florence. Miss Marple's young maid bustled in with a tray of tea, her cheeks flushed with the thrill of news. "Oh, miss, have you heard about the goings-on at Much Benham?" she began, setting the tray down with a clink. "A proper scandal, it is. That actress, Miss Sylvia Vane, the one in all the picture papers, she's had her jewels stolen right out of her bungalow. Sapphires, they say, big as pigeon eggs, taken in the dead of night." Miss Marple's pale blue eyes, sharp despite her years, lifted from her knitting. "Stolen, you say?" Her voice was gentle, almost dreamy, but there was a keenness in it that Florence missed. "Tell me more, Florence. What does the village say?" Florence, eager to oblige, perched on the edge of a chair, her apron slightly askew. "Well, miss, it happened at that fancy riverside bungalow she's taken for the summer. There was a grand party, with all sorts actors, writers, even some of the gentry from Benham Hall. Miss Vane says she went to bed after midnight, the jewels safe in their case by her bedside. Come morning, the case was empty and the window was open. They're saying a masked thief crept in while she slept. The police are there now, poking about, but nobody's seen hide nor hair of those sapphires." Miss Marple poured her tea, the steam curling upward in delicate spirals. "A masked thief," she murmured, her tone thoughtful. "How very dramatic. And Miss Vane, what do they say of her?" "Oh, she's in a state, miss, crying and carrying on, saying those jewels were her pride and joy, gifts from some rich admirer. The papers are full of it, her pictures everywhere, looking ever so tragic." Florence lowered her voice, as if sharing a secret. "Some in the village reckon she's playing it up, her being an actress and all. But that's just talk, isn't it?" Miss Marple smiled faintly, her needles pausing for a moment. "Talk, Florence, is often the first thread in a tangle. What else do they say of this party? Who was there?" Florence frowned, trying to recall the snippets she'd overheard at the butcher's. "Well, there was that handsome actor, Mr. Ronald Blakey's, in Miss Vane's films, always playing the hero. And a lady writer, Miss Morton, I think, who writes those sharp plays. Oh, and Mr. Gray, the insurance man, who's been seen about the bungalow a lot lately. The servants didn't see nothing, or so they say. The police inspector Crane's in charge. Think it was some clever outsider, maybe from London, who knew about the jewels." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression serene, but her mind already turning over the details like cards in a game of patience. A theft at a party, a glamorous victim, an open window, and a masked intruder. It was all so perfectly staged, so vividly theatrical. She thought of Sylvia Vane, whose face she had seen in the illustrated magazines, all wide eyes and practiced poses. Actresses, Miss Marple knew, lived for the spotlight, and a scandal like this would cast a dazzling glow. Inspector Crane, she said, almost to herself, is a thorough man, but perhaps not one for subtleties. A crime like this, Florence, requires a certain flair to unravel. A theatrical crime demands a theatrical mind. Florence blinked, unsure what to make of this. Do you think they'll catch the thief? Miss O's jewels must be worth king's ransom. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her face remained composed. I dare say they will find what they're looking for, in time. But jewels, my dear, are not always the true prize in such affairs. She set her cup down and resumed her knitting, the soft click of the needles filling the room once more as Florence cleared the tray and chattered on about village matters. Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on the riverside bungalow. She pictured its modern lines, its glass walls reflecting the river's gleam, and the glittering crowd that had filled it on the night of the theft. She knew little of much Benham's high society, but she knew people, their vanities, their secrets, the small gestures that betrayed them. Already she sensed a pattern forming, faint but unmistakable, like the first stitches of a complex design. Florence, she said suddenly, interrupting the maid's tale of a lost cat, do you know if Mrs. Bantry has heard of this affair? She moves in such circles, and I should like to hear her thoughts. Florence nodded eagerly. Oh yes, Mrs. Bantry was at the post office this morning, saying she knew Miss Vane's set. She called it a dreadful business, but said she'd call on you soon to talk it over. Miss Marple nodded, satisfied. Very good. I shall look forward to her visit. Now, don't let me keep you from your duties. As Florence hurried off, Miss Marple leaned back in her chair, her knitting resting in her lap. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden. The scandal at Much Benham, she felt, was only beginning to unfold, and she, with her quiet ways and watchful eyes, would be ready to trace its threads to their source. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The morning air carried a crisp edge as Miss Jane Marple stepped from the hired car onto the gravel drive of the riverside bungalow, her gloved hand steadying her modest black hat. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, her friend of many years, had insisted on the visit, her curiosity about the Much Benham scandal outweighing her usual preference for the comforts of Gossington Hall. Jane, she had said over breakfast, her eyes alight with mischief, you simply must see this place. It's all glass and glamour, like something from one of those Hollywood films. And Sylvia Vane, well, she's a character straight out of a play. Miss Marple, ever obliging when a puzzle beckoned, had agreed, though her interest lay not in the bungalow's modern charms, but in the human drama that had unfolded within its walls. The theft of Sylvia Vane's sapphires, so vividly recounted by Florence, had stirred her quiet mind, and she sensed already that the truth lay not in the obvious, but in the small, overlooked details, the kind that people like Inspector Crane, for all his diligence, often missed. The riverside bungalow stood on a gentle rise above the river Ben, its sleek lines and expansive windows catching the morning light like a polished gem. Unlike the sturdy stone cottages of St. Mary Mead, it was a structure of bold ambition, its flat roof and glass walls proclaiming a defiance of tradition. The river, sluggish and silver, curled lazily at its base, fringed by willows that swayed in the breeze. A neatly manicured lawn stretched to the water's edge, broken only by a flagstone path leading to a small jetty. Miss Marple paused, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. The undisturbed grass, the pristine path, the faint gleam of dew on the garden gate. A stage, she murmured, set for a very particular performance. Mrs. Bantry, bustling ahead in a tweed coat, waved to a figure at the bungalow's entrance. "There's Sylvia," she called, her voice bright with the thrill of proximity. To fame, Miss Marple followed at a measured pace, her black umbrella serving as both cane and prop. Her expression one of polite curiosity. Sylvia Vane stood framed in the doorway, a vision of calculated elegance. Her auburn hair was swept into a loose chignon, and her silk dressing gown, a deep emerald, shimmered as she moved. She was perhaps 35, though her flawless skin and wide, expressive eyes suggested youth preserved by artifice. Her smile, warm yet tinged with fragility, was that of a woman accustomed to being watched. "Mrs. Bantry, how kind of you to come," she said, her voice low and musical, with a faint tremor that invited sympathy. "And this must be your friend, Miss Marple, is it? I'm so grateful. This dreadful business has left me quite undone." Miss Marple inclined her head, her smile gentle but her gaze keen. "I am sorry to hear of your trouble, Miss Vane. It must be a great shock." Sylvia's hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture Miss Marple noted as both practiced and effective. "A shock? Oh, it's beyond that. Those sapphires were my treasure. A gift from someone very dear. To think of them stolen, right from under my nose." She ushered them inside, her movements graceful but faintly restless, as if she feared stillness would betray her. The bungalow's interior was as striking as its exterior, all open space and gleaming surfaces. The drawing room, where Sylvia led them, was a symphony of modern taste. Low, angular furniture upholstered in cream, abstract paintings in bold reds and blues, and a vast window offering an unbroken view of the river. A grand piano stood in one corner, its lid propped open to reveal sheet music scattered carelessly across the keys. The air carried a faint scent of jasmine, likely from Sylvia's perfume, and Miss Marple noted a crystal decanter on a side table, half filled with amber liquid. Everything, she thought, was arranged to impress, yet there was a brittleness to the scene, as if it might shatter under scrutiny. They settled on a sofa, and Sylvia rang a small silver bell. A maid, Elsie, appeared, a slight girl with anxious eyes and a tendency to fidget with her apron. "Tea, please, Elsie," Sylvia said, her tone kind but edged with impatience. Elsie bobbed a curtsy and vanished, her footsteps quick on the polished floor. "Now," Sylvia began, leaning forward, "I must tell you everything, though it pains me to relive it." Her account was vivid, delivered with the cadence of a seasoned performer. The night of the theft had been a glittering affair, a party to celebrate her latest film's completion. Guests had filled the bungalow, actors, writers, local notables, to a gramophone, sipping cocktails and spilling onto the lawn under the stars. She had worn the sapphires, she said, their blue fire drawing gasps from the crowd. "I felt like a queen," she murmured, her eyes distant, "but by midnight I was exhausted. I retired to my room, locked the jewel case, and placed it on my dressing table. I slept soundly, too soundly, perhaps. At dawn I woke to find the case empty, the window ajar, and those dreadful footprints on the carpet." Mrs. Bantry, enthralled, leaned forward. "Footprints, how thrilling! And the police, what did they say?" Sylvia's lips tightened briefly, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Inspector Crane is doing his best, I suppose. He believes a thief slipped in during the party's chaos, though how they managed it without being seen, I can't imagine. The window shows no signs of being forced, but the footprints lead straight to the garden. It's all so bewildering. Miss Marple listened in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The story was compelling, yet something in Sylvia's delivery, the careful pauses, the practiced tremor struck her as too perfect, like a script rehearsed to the last syllable. She glanced at the room's edges, noting the absence of dust, the meticulous arrangement of ornaments. A house, she thought, could reveal as much as its owner if one knew where to look. Inspector Crane arrived shortly after, a sturdy man in his 40s with a ruddy complexion and a moustache that seemed to bristle with determination. He greeted Mrs. Bantry with polite deference and Miss Marple with a nod that suggested he viewed her as a harmless, eccentric. "Miss Vane has told you the particulars, I presume," he said, his voice brisk. "A nasty business, but we're making progress. The footprints are our best lead, muddy, size 10, leading from the bedroom to the lawn. We're combing the riverbank for more traces. May we see the room?" Miss Marple asked, her tone mild but insistent. Crane hesitated, then nodded, perhaps sensing that refusal would only prolong her interest. Sylvia led them upstairs, her silk gown whispering against the polished steps. The bedroom was a study in luxury, a wide bed draped in cream satin, a mirrored dressing table cluttered with perfume bottles, and a wardrobe spilling with furs and silks. The window, a tall panel of glass, overlooked the garden and the river. Beyond, it stood closed now, its latch gleaming in the sunlight. The carpet, a soft grey, bore the faint outline of the footprints Crane had described, though they were smudged as if someone had tried to erase them. Miss Marple approached the window, her umbrella tapping lightly on the floor. She examined the frame, running a gloved finger along its edge. The wood was smooth, unmarred by scratches or dents. She pushed the window open. It moved silently, its hinges well oiled. "A thief," she said softly, "would need great skill to open this." Without a sound, and the latch quite secure. "I see." Crane nodded, mistaking her observation for approval. "Exactly, Miss Marple. The thief likely knew the house, or had help. We're questioning the servants, though they claim ignorance." Sylvia, standing by the dressing table, touched the empty jewel-caser velvet-lined box with a broken lock. "I should have put it in the safe," she said, her voice catching, "but I never dreamed anyone would dare." Mrs. Bantry, peering at the footprints, shivered. "It's like something from a novel. A masked figure creeping through the night-o. Jane, what do you make of it?" Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the window frame, then drifted to the carpet. "It is certainly intriguing," she said, her tone neutral. She knelt, with some effort, to inspect the footprints more closely. The mud was dry now, a faint brown stain, but the marks were uneven, some deeper than others, as if the intruder had hesitated or shifted weight. She rose, brushing her skirt, and turned to Sylvia. "The party must have been quite lively. Did you notice anything unusual before you retired?" Sylvia shook her head, her expression earnest. "Nothing at all. Everyone was in high spirits. Shonald Blake was charming the ladies. Clara Morton was arguing about her latest play, and Mr. Gray was fussing over some insurance papers. It was just a party, like any other." Miss Marple nodded, filing away the names. "Ronald Blake, the actor. Clara Morton, the playwright, Mr. Gray, the insurance agent. Each, she suspected, held a piece of the puzzle, whether they knew it or not. She glanced at the dressing table, noting a small silver key half hidden among the perfume bottles. "Is this the key to the jewel case?" she asked. Sylvia started, then recovered quickly. "Oh, yes. I found it under the table this morning. It must have fallen during the theft." Miss Marple's smile was faint but knowing. "How fortunate to find it," she said, and said no more. They returned to the drawing room, where Elsie served tea with trembling hands. Miss Marple watched the girl closely, noting her pale face and the way her eyes darted to Sylvia before settling on the floor. A nervous servant, she thought, could be a goldmine of information if approached with care. She sipped her tea, listening as Sylvia recounted the party's guest list for Crane's benefit. The inspector scribbled in his notebook, his brow furrowed. With the effort of keeping up, Mrs. Bantry, unable to resist, pressed Sylvia for details. "Who was this admirer who gave you the sapphires?" "Someone terribly romantic, I imagine." Sylvia's laugh was light, but her eyes flickered. "Oh, a gentleman from my past. I don't like to speak of her, it's too painful now." She dabbed at her eyes with a laced handkerchief, a gesture Miss Marple found oddly theatrical. As the conversation drifted to local gossip, Miss Marple's mind worked quietly. The bungalow, with its open spaces and glass walls, was a poor setting for a secret theft too exposed to easily observed. The footprints, smudged and inconsistent, suggested haste or artifice. The window, pristine and silent, contradicted the image of a clumsy intruder. And Sylvia herself, her tears, her poise, her quick recovery of the key, seemed less a victim than a director of her own drama. Crane, preparing to leave, thanked Sylvia for her cooperation. "We'll find those jewels, Miss Vane," he said with gruff confidence. "Thieves always slip up somewhere." Sylvia clasped his hand, her expression one of fervent hope. "I trust you, Inspector. You've no idea what this means to me." Miss Marple, rising to follow Mrs. Bantry to the car, paused at the drawing-room's threshold. She glanced back at Sylvia, who was rearranging a vase of roses with studied care. "Miss Vane," she said, her voice soft, "you must take care. A thief bold enough to enter your room might return for more." Sylvia's smile faltered, just for a moment. I shall be vigilant, Miss Marple, thank you." As the car crunched down the gravel drive, Mrs. Bantry chattered about Sylvia's beauty and the audacity of the crime. Miss Marple listened, her hands folded over her umbrella, her thoughts elsewhere. The riverside bungalow, she felt, was a stage indeed, but the play was not yet over. The footprints, the window, the key, they were props in a carefully crafted scene, and she intended to uncover the script. Back at Gossington Hall, over a late lunch, Mrs. Bantry pressed her for impressions. "Well, Jane, isn't it all terribly exciting? Do you think it was a professional thief, or someone from the party?" Miss Marple buttered a scone, her movements deliberate. "It is early to say, Dolly, but I will tell you this. A crime so neatly staged often hides a simpler truth. We must look beyond the glitter to see what lies beneath." Mrs. Bantry laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible, Jane. Always so cryptic. But I know that you've already got your eye on something, haven't you?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, her eyes bright with the quiet thrill of the chase. "Perhaps," she said, and took a delicate bite of her scone. Chapter 3. The Cast of Characters. The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the riverside bungalow's drawing room, casting delicate patterns on the polished floor as Miss Jane Marple settled into a cushioned armchair. Her black umbrella rested against her knee, a silent companion to her quiet observations. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, ever the enthusiastic hostess, had arranged this impromptu tea, ostensibly to cheer Sylvia Vane after her ordeal, but Miss Marple suspected her. Friends' motives leaned more toward curiosity than charity. The theft of the sapphires had set tongues wagging from St. Mary Mead to Much Benham, and Dolly, with her knack for society, had ensured a gathering of the bungalow's lingering guests each. Miss Marple knew a potential key to the puzzle. The room hummed with subdued chatter, the clink of teacups, and the faint rustle of Sylvia's emerald silk gown as she moved among her guests. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind their mild expression, took in the scene with the precision of a painter, studying a canvas. People, she had long observed, revealed themselves most when they believed themselves unobserved, and a drawing-room tea was as fine a stage as any for such revelations. Sylvia Vane, the centre of attention, played her role with practiced grace. Her auburn hair caught the light as she poured tea, her smile warm but tinged with a fragility that invited sympathy. "You're all so kind to rally round me," she said, her voice soft yet carrying, as if addressing an unseen audience. "This dreadful theft has left me quite shaken, but your presence is a comfort." Her gaze lingered on each guest, a touch longer on some than others, and Miss Marple noted the faint tension in her posture. Like a string pulled taut, seated near the grand piano was Ronald Blake, Sylvia's leading man, a figure of undeniable charm. He was in his early 30s, with dark hair swept back from a high forehead and eyes that sparkled with restless energy. His tailored suit, though slightly rumpled, spoke of a man accustomed to admiration, and his laugh, frequent and easy, filled the room. Yet Miss Marple observed a certain watchfulness in him, a quick glance towards Sylvia whenever she spoke, as if gauging her mood. He was recounting a filming anecdote to Mrs. Bantry, his hands animated, but his voice held a note of strain, like an actor unsure of his lines. Across the room, Clara Morton, the playwright, sat with a posture that suggested defiance. She was a woman of 40, with sharp features and a mane of grey-streaked hair pinned carelessly at her nape. Her dress, a severe black frock, contrasted with the bungalow's opulence, and her thin lips curled into a smirk as she listened to Sylvia's pleasantries. Clara's reputation, Miss Marple had learned from Dolly, rested on her biting satires, plays that skewered the vanities of the theatrical world. Her presence at Sylvia's party seemed curious, given the rumours of professional rivalry. As Sylvia passed her a teacup, Clara's eyes narrowed, and she murmured something Miss Marple couldn't catch, though Sylvia's smile faltered for an instant. Mr. Percival Gray, the insurance agent, occupied a corner near the window, his slight frame almost lost in the shadow of a potted palm. He was an unremarkable man, middle-aged, balding, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a suit of sober grey, but his nervous energy drew Miss Marple's attention. His fingers tapped a restless rhythm on his saucer, and his gaze darted between Sylvia and the other guests, as if calculating odds. Dolly had mentioned that Gray had insured Sylvia's sapphires, a policy he'd personally overseen, and his eagerness to assist Inspector Crane struck Miss Marple as unusual for a man whose firm stood to lose a fortune. He caught her eye and offered a thin smile, which she returned with a nod. Her expression serene, but her mind alert. The servants, too, were part of the tableau. Elsie, the nervous maid, moved silently among the guests, her hands trembling as she refilled cups. Her pale face and downcast eyes suggested a fear of drawing attention, and Miss Marple noted how she avoided Sylvia's gaze, as if afraid of reprimand. Harris, the butler, stood by the door, his tall frame rigid, his expression one of stoic detachment. He was perhaps 50, with greying hair and a demeanour that spoke of long service, yet his eyes followed the room's dynamics with a quiet intensity. Miss Marple wondered what secrets a butler might overhear in a house like this, where walls were glass and privacy an illusion. Mrs. Bantry, seated beside Miss Marple, leaned close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "What a collection, Jane. Ronald's a charmer, but he's got that hungry look ambition, I'd say. Clara's positively venomous, and Mr. Greywell, he's like a mouse in a trap. What do you make of them?" Miss Marple's needles, tucked in her reticule for the occasion, would have clicked softly had she been knitting, but her hands were still, folded neatly in her lap. "They are interesting, Dolly," she said, her tone mild. "Each has a part to play, I think, though they may not know it yet. People, you know, are rarely what they seem at first glance." Sylvia, catching the tail of their conversation, glided over, her gown shimmering. "Miss Marple, you must tell Mead you think the police will find my sapphires. I'm at my wit's end." Her eyes, wide and pleading, were those of a damsel in a melodrama, but Miss Marple sensed a calculation beneath the surface, a weighing of effect. "I am sure Inspector Crane is thorough," Miss Marple replied, her voice gentle, "but such crimes often turn on the smallest details. Tell me, Miss Vane, who among your guests knew of the sapphire's value?" Sylvia hesitated, her fingers brushing a pearl earring. "Oh, everyone, I suppose. I wore them that night, they were impossible to miss. Ronald admired them, said they matched my eyes. Clara made some cutting remark about gaudy baubles, but that's just her way. And Mr. Gray, of course, knew their worth from the insurance papers." She sighed, a delicate sound. "I trusted my friends, Miss Marple. Perhaps that was my mistake." Miss Marple nodded, her expression sympathetic, but her mind cataloguing the names. Ronald's flattery, Clara's scorn, Gray's not was a thread in the tapestry, and she intended to follow them all. She turned her attention to Ronald, who was now charming a local squire's wife with a tale of a film stunt gone awry. "Mr. Blake," she called softly, her voice cutting through the chatter, "you must have seen many grand parties in your work. Was there anything unusual about this one?" Ronald's laugh was quick, but his eyes flicked to Sylvia before answering. "Unusual? Not at all, Miss Marple. It was the usual mix, too much champagne, too many egos. Sylvia was the star, as always, and the sapphires were the talk of the night. I didn't notice anything odd, though I was rather busy playing host." His smile was dazzling, but Miss Marple noted a tightness at its edges, as if he were guarding something. Clara Morton, overhearing, snorted. "Busy? You were flirting with every woman in the room, Ronald. If there was a thief, you'd have been too distracted to notice." Her tone was sharp, and Ronald's smile faltered, though he recovered with a shrug. "Now, Clara," he said, "no need to rewrite the script. We were all having a grand time except you, perhaps, scribbling your next play in the corner." Clara's eyes flashed, but before she could retort, Sylvia intervened, her laugh light and forced. "Oh, you two, always sparring. It's like one of Clara's comedies." The tension eased, but Miss Marple noted the undercurrent. The way Clara's fingers tightened on her teacup, The way Ronald's gaze lingered on Sylvia, seeking approval by Mr. Gray, perhaps sensing scrutiny, approached Miss Marple, his manner deferential. "You're a friend of Mrs. Bantry's, I understand," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "This theft must seem quite a to-do for a quiet village like St. Mary Mead. I assure you, my firm is doing all it can to assist the police. The sapphires were insured for a considerable sum, but we'll see Miss Vane made whole." Miss Marple's smile was polite, but her eyes were keen. "How diligent of you, Mr. Gray. It must be trying, managing such a claim. Were you at the party?" "Long, you must have seen the jewels displayed." Gray's fingers twitched, and he cleared his throat. "I was there briefly, yes. Miss Vane showed the sapphires to several guests, myself included. A fine piece, though I'm no expert in aesthetics, only in their value." He laughed, a dry sound, and excused himself to speak with Harris. Mrs. Bantry, sipping her tea, whispered, "He's awfully jumpy, isn't he? You'd think he'd stolen the jewels himself." Miss Marple's lips curved faintly. Nervousness, Dolly, can mean many things: guilt, fear, or simply discomfort. We must be patient to learn which. As the tea progressed, Miss Marple engaged each guest in turn, her questions gentle but probing. To Ronald, she inquired about the film industry's pressures, drawing out his admission that his latest role depended on Sylvia's favor. "She's the star," he said, his tone light but his eyes dark. "I'm just the supporting act, hoping for a break." To Clara, she spoke of playwriting, coaxing a bitter remark about Sylvia's meddling in her last production. "She's no artist," Clara said, her voice low, "just a face who craves applause." With Elsie, Miss Marple was especially careful, catching the maid as she cleared plates. "It must be hard, my dear," she said, her tone grandmotherly, "working in such a lively house. Did you see much of the party?" Elsie's cheeks flushed, and she stammered that she'd been in the kitchen, though her eyes flickered toward the drawing-room door where Sylvia stood. Harris, when questioned about the night's routine, was polite but guarded, saying only that the guests had kept him busy until 2. The afternoon waned, and the guests began to depart, their farewells punctuated by Sylvia's effusive thanks. Miss Marple lingered, her umbrella in hand, watching as Sylvia bid Ronald goodbye with a touch to his arm, a gesture too intimate for mere colleagues. Clara's parting glance at Sylvia was cold, and Gray's bow was stiff, his spectacles glinting, as he hurried to his car. In the car, back to Gossington Hall, Mrs. Bantry was alight with speculation. "Well, Jane, what a crew. Ronald's smitten with Sylvia, or her fame, and Clara could kill her with a look. Gray's hiding something, I'd bet my best hat. And those servants Elsie's, scared stiff, and Harris is like a statue. Who's your money on?" Miss Marple gazed out the window, the river's silver ribbon fading into dusk. "It is not a matter of money, Dolly, but of motives. Each has a reason to wish Sylvia ill, to profit from her misfortune. Ronald seeks fame, Clara revenge. Gray perhaps security. The servants see more than they say, and Sylvia—" She paused, her voice soft. "Sylvia is the playwright of this drama, I think, though she may not yet know the ending." Mrs. Bantry laughed, shaking her head. "You're maddening, Jane, always seeing 3 moves ahead. But I'll say this sits better than any film Sylvia's ever made." Miss Marple's smile was serene, her mind already tracing the threads of the afternoon: Ronald's ambition, Clara's bitterness, Gray's unease, Elsie's fear, Harris's silence. The riverside bungalow, she thought, was a house of mirrors, reflecting truths distorted by desire, and she, with her quiet ways and watchful eyes, would peer through the glass to find the one truth that mattered. Chapter 4. A question of timing. The late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of Gossington Hall, casting long shadows across the polished oak table where Miss Jane Marple sat with a cup of tea, her mind far from the pleasantries of Mrs. Dolly Bantry's chatter. The events at the riverside bungalow, so vividly theatrical in their unfolding, had settled into her thoughts like pieces of a half-finished jigsaw. The theft of Sylvia Vane's sapphires, with its masked intruder and muddy footprints, was a puzzle that demanded precision, and Miss Marple, with her knack for untangling human motives, was already sifting through the details gleaned from her visit. The key, she felt, lay not in the drama of the crime but in its quieter moments, the hours, the minutes, the fleeting glances that betrayed the truth. Mrs. Bantry, sprawled in an armchair with a slice of fruitcake, was recounting the bungalow's tea party with relish. Jane, wasn't Clara Morton simply venomous? And Ronald Blake such a charmer? But I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. What do you make of it all? Surely you've got some theory brewing in that clever head of yours. Miss Marple's smile was faint, her pale blue eyes resting on the steam curling from her teacup. Theories, Dolly, are like knitting patterns, best not rushed until the stitches are clear. But I will say this, the timing of Miss Vane's theft is curious. Timing, you know, often tells us more than footprints or open windows. Dolly's eyebrows rose, but before she could press further, a knock at the door announced Inspector Crane, his ruddy face flushed from the drive. He had telephoned earlier, requesting Miss Marple's presence at a meeting to review the case. A courtesy extended at Mrs. Bantry's insistence that her friend had a way with puzzles. Miss Marple, though privately amused by the inspector's reluctance, had agreed, sensing an opportunity to probe deeper into the bungalow's secrets. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, Crane said, removing his hat with a nod. I've just come from the bungalow. Thought you might like to hear the latest, seeing as you've taken an interest. Mind you, it's a straightforward case, despite the theatrics. A professional thief, likely, using the party as cover. Miss Marple inclined her head, her expression one of polite attention. How very thorough of you, Inspector. I should be most interested to hear your findings. Perhaps we might discuss the sequence of events. The when of a crime, I find, is often as telling as the how. Crane, settling into a chair, opened his notebook with a businesslike air. Right, then. Let's go over it. Miss Vane's party began at 8 on Saturday night. Guests about 30, by our count, were in and out of the drawing room, the lawn, the dining room, music, dancing, the usual. Miss Vane says she wore the sapphires until 11, then took them off, locked them in their case, and retired to her bedroom by midnight. She claims she was asleep by past, the jewel case on her dressing table. At 6 the next morning, she awoke, found the case empty, the window ajar, and those footprints on the carpet. Party ended around 2, with the last guests leaving by taxi or car. Miss Marple listened, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her mind turning over the hours like pages in a book. And the servants, she asked, what do they say of the night's end? Crane flipped a page in his notebook. Harris, the butler, locked up at 2:15 after checking the doors and windows, says everything was secure, including the garden gate, which needs a key kept in the hall. Elsie, the maid, was clearing glasses till 1, then went to bed. In the servants' quarters, neither saw anything unusual though Elsie's a bit jumpy keeps, saying she heard creaks but can't pin them down. Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her eyes bright. Creaks. That could be the thief, sneaking about. Oh, Jane, isn't it thrilling? Miss Marple's lips twitched, but her tone remained measured. Creaks, Dolly, are common in a house full of guests, but the timing midnight to 6 a wide window for a thief to work unnoticed. Inspector, what are the guests' movements after midnight? Crane frowned, his mustache twitching, harder to pin down. Most were tipsy, milling about the lawn or the drawing room. Ronald Blake says he was entertaining till 1 though. He's vague on details. Clara Morton claims she was in the library, reading, till 1:30. Mr. Gray left early, around 11, but he's been back daily, fussing over the insurance. No one admits to seeing anything near Miss Vane's room, and the upstairs hall was quiet, according to Harris. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts drifting to the bungalow's layout, the open glass walls, the exposed staircase, the bedroom's proximity to the party's noise. A thief slipping upstairs would need nerve or familiarity to go unseen. She recalled the window's pristine frame, the smudged footprints, and Sylvia's quick recovery of the jewel case key. The garden gate, she said softly, locked with a key indoors. That is interesting. Have you examined the ground beneath the bedroom window? Crane brightened, sensing firmer ground. Yes, indeed. The soil's soft from recent rain. Perfect for prints. We found traces of mud matching the carpet's same texture, same color. The trail fades at the lawn, but it's clear the thief came and went that way. No marks on the gate or the jetty, mind you, so they likely scaled the fence or had a key. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression remained serene. A thief in a hurry, then, yet careful enough to leave no trace beyond the window. How very precise. She paused, then added, Might I see the bungalow again? Inspector, a second look at the scene could clarify things. Crane hesitated, his instinct for protocol warring with Mrs. Bantry's expectant gaze. Well, I suppose there's no harm. Miss Vane's at a rehearsal today, but Harris can let us in. I'll drive you myself. The journey to Much Benham was swift, the countryside rolling past in a blur of green fields and hedgerows. The riverside bungalow, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, seemed almost too perfect, its glass walls reflecting the river's gleam like a mirror. Harris greeted them at the door, his stoic face betraying no surprise at their return. Miss Vane is out, sir, he said to Crane, but you're welcome to look about. Miss Marple, her umbrella tapping lightly on the gravel, followed Crane to the bedroom, her steps slow but deliberate. The room was as she remembered, the satin-draped bed, the mirrored dressing table, the wide window with its view of the garden and river. The footprints on the carpet, now cordoned off with string, were fainter but still visible, their smudged edges a silent challenge. She knelt, with some effort, to study them, noting their uneven depths and sharp, others blurred, as if the intruder had paused or shifted weight. Rising, she approached the window, pushing it open to test its movement. The hinges, well-oiled, moved without a sound, but she frowned at the latch, its metal gleaming without a single scratch. A thief, she murmured, would need great skill to open this from outside, and greater luck to do so silently. Yet the party's noise, I suppose, could mask much. Crane, watching her, nodded. That's my thinking. The gramophone was blaring till late, and the guests were loud. A quick climb, a jimmy of the latch, and he's in. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the garden below. The soil beneath the window was soft, as Crane had said, but the marks were shallow, barely denting the earth. She recalled her own experiment in her garden, pressing her shoe into damp soil. The impression had been deep, clear. These marks, by contrast, seemed tentative, almost staged. "Inspector," she said, "have you considered the weight of the thief? A man's boot, size 10, should leave a deeper print, especially in haste." Crane blinked, caught off guard. "Well, we assumed he was light on his feet. A professional, like I said. They know how to tread soft." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her eyes were keen. "Perhaps, but assumptions, Inspector, are like loose stitches. They unravel under strain." She turned to Harris, who hovered in the doorway. "Mr. Harris, you locked the garden gate at 2:15, you said. Was it undisturbed that night?" Harris's expression remained impassive, but his fingers twitched slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I checked it myself. The key was in its place in the hall, and the lock was fast." "And the key," Miss Marple pressed, "was it ever out of your sight during the party?" Harris hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Not that I recall, ma'am, but with so many guests, I was run off my feet. It's possible someone took it, though I'd swear it was there when I locked up." Miss Marple nodded, filing away the butler's discomfort. She thanked him and turned back to the room, her gaze settling on the dressing table. The jewel case, empty now, sat beside a clutter of perfume bottles and a small silver mirror. The key, which Sylvia had found under the table, was nowhere in sight. "Miss Vane's habits," she said to Crane, "are they consistent? Did she always leave the case here, so exposed?" Crane shrugged, consulting his notes. "She says so. Says she liked to see the sapphires last thing at night. A bit careless, if you ask me, but she's an actress, likes her dramatics." Miss Marple's lips pursed, a subtle sign of her skepticism. She recalled Sylvia's account. Retired at midnight, asleep by past, the jewels safe. Yet the party's chaos, the open layout of the bungalow, and the locked gate suggested a thief would need more than opportunity, they would need knowledge. She stepped into the hall, glancing down the staircase to the drawing room below. The glass walls offered little cover. A stranger creeping upstairs would be seen, unless the guests were too distracted to notice. As they descended, Miss Marple paused by the hall table, where the garden gate key hung on a brass hook. She touched it lightly, noting its weight. "A heavy key," she said, almost to herself. "Not easily misplaced, nor easily borrowed without notice." Crane, growing impatient, checked his watch. "Anything else, Miss Marple?" "I've got men searching the riverbank, and I need to report to the station." Miss Marple's smile was apologetic, but her mind was far from finished. "Just one thing, Inspector. Might I speak with Elsie again? A maid sees much, even in a busy house." Crane sighed, but signalled to Harris, who fetched Elsie from the kitchen. The maid appeared, her apron twisted in her hands, her eyes darting nervously between Crane and Miss Marple. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. Miss Marple's tone was grandmotherly, designed to soothe. "Elsie, my dear, you must have been exhausted. After the party, clearing up till 1, you said. Did you see Miss Vane at all after she retired? Perhaps checking on the guests?" Elsie's cheeks flushed, and she glanced at the floor. I don't know, ma'am. I was in the kitchen mostly, washing glasses. But," she hesitated, her voice dropping, "I did see Miss Vane later, in her dressing gown, pacing the hall. Must have been past midnight, maybe 1. I thought she was just restless. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her expression remained gentle. Pacing, you say? How interesting. And was she alone? Elsie nodded, her fingers tightening on her apron. Yes, ma'am. I didn't stay long, just went back to the kitchen. I didn't want to pry. Miss Marple thanked her, and Elsie scurried off, clearly relieved. Crane, scribbling in his notebook, looked skeptical. Doesn't mean much, does it? Miss Vane could have been checking the house, or getting a drink. Doesn't make her a thief. Of course not, Miss Marple said, her tone placating. But small details, Inspector, are like breadcrumbs. They lead us somewhere, if we follow. She declined Crane's offer of a lift back, choosing instead to walk the short distance to Gossington Hall with Mrs. Bantry, who had been waiting in the drawing room, gossiping with Harris. As they strolled along the river path, Dolly was alight with questions. Jane, you're onto something, I can tell. That business with Elsie Sylvia up and pacing a 1. What does it mean? And those shallow footprints? You don't think it was a professional thief, do you? Miss Marple's umbrella tapped rhythmically on the path, her gaze fixed on the river's lazy flow. I think, Dolly, that a thief in a hurry would not tread so lightly, nor leave a window so clean. And a lady who retires at midnight does not pace at 1, unless something keeps her awake. Timing, my dear, is a harsh critic. Exposes the flaws in any performance. Dolly laughed, shaking her head. You're impossible, Jane. Always talking in riddles. But I'll wager you've got half the case solved already. Miss Marple's smile was serene, her thoughts weaving through the hours of that fateful night. Sylvia's wakefulness, the locked gate, the shallow prints, they were not mere details, but signposts, pointing to a truth hidden in plain sight. The riverside bungalow, she felt, was a house of carefully set props, and she, with her quiet persistence, would rearrange them to reveal the script's true author. Chapter 5. The actresses masked the soft hum of village life in St. Mary. Mead was briefly disrupted by the arrival of the Morning Post, which brought with it a fresh wave of speculation about the theft at the riverside bungalow. Miss Jane Marple, seated at her small writing desk in the parlour, paused in her correspondence to glance at the local paper, its headline proclaiming, "Actresses' sapphires stolen in daring heist." The article, accompanied by a glamorous photograph of Sylvia Vane, recounted the crime in breathless detail, painting her as a tragic heroine beset by misfortune. Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly, her pale blue eyes narrowing as she read. The story, she thought, was too perfectly crafted, too neatly aligned with Sylvia as a public persona. It was the work of an actress, not a victim. Her knitting lay idle in its basket, for today her mind was occupied with the threads of human nature rather than wool. The visit to the bungalow, the tea with its cast of characters, and Elsie's revelation about Sylvia's late-night pacing had deepened her suspicion that the theft was not what it seemed. Sylvia Vane, with her practiced tears and poised vulnerability, was at the heart of the mystery, and Miss Marple intended to peel back the layers of her performance to uncover what lay beneath. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, ever eager for intrigue, had invited Miss Marple to a village tea at the vicarage, where Sylvia Vane was expected to make an appearance. "She's offering a reward for the jewel's return," Dolly had said over the telephone, her voice brimming with excitement. "The whole village is talking about it. You must come, Jane, it's sure to be revealing." Miss Marple, sensing an opportunity to observe Sylvia in a public setting, had agreed, though her interest lay less in the reward than in the actress's motives for offering it. The vicarage garden was a charming affair, with roses climbing the stone walls and tables. Set beneath a striped marquee, the villagers, dressed in their Sunday best, mingled with a few of Much Benham's gentry, their chatter a lively hum punctuated by the clink of teacups. Sylvia Vane arrived fashionably late, her entrance as carefully staged as any scene in her films. She wore a tailored navy dress that accentuated her slender figure, her auburn hair swept beneath a chic cloche hat. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes, Miss Marple noted, held a flicker of calculation, as if she were assessing the crowd's reaction. The vicar, a kindly man with a tendency to ramble, introduced Sylvia with a flourish, praising her generosity. In offering a reward of £500 for the sapphire's return, Sylvia stepped forward, her voice clear and tremulous, carrying over the garden like a stage soliloquy. "My friends," she began, clasping her hands, "you cannot imagine the pain of losing something so precious, not for its value, but for its sentiment. Those sapphires were a gift from a dear friend, a reminder of happier times. I beg anyone with information to come forward. This reward is my hope of seeing them restored." The crowd murmured, some nodding sympathetically, others whispering. Behind their fans, a reporter from the Much Benham Gazette scribbled furiously, and a photographer snapped a picture, capturing Sylvia's poised distress. Miss Marple, seated near the marquee's edge with a cup of Earl Grey, watched the performance with quiet intensity. The tears that glistened in Sylvia's eyes were convincing, yet they came too readily, like a tap turned on cue. The reward, she suspected, was less about recovery than publicity, a way to keep Sylvia's name in the headlines. Mrs. Bantry, beside her, nudged Miss Marple's arm. "Isn't she marvellous, Jane? So brave, putting on a show despite her loss. But I suppose that's what actresses do, isn't it? Turn tragedy into drama." Miss Marple's smile was faint, her needles absent, but her mind clicking like them. "Indeed, Dolly, and a good actress knows her audience. Miss Vane plays her part well, but I wonder, is the script her own?" She sipped her tea, her gaze drifting to the villagers, some of whom were eyeing Sylvia with awe, others with skepticism. Gossip, she knew, was a village's lifeblood, and Sylvia's reward had stirred it anew. After her speech, Sylvia mingled with the guests, accepting condolences with grace. Miss Marple observed her closely, noting the way she lingered with the reporter, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper, and the way she avoided Clara Morton, who stood apart, her sharp eyes fixed on Sylvia with undisguised contempt. Ronald Blake was absent, likely at a rehearsal, but Mr. Percival Grey was present, his nervous demeanour unchanged. He hovered near Sylvia, offering murmured assurances about the insurance claim, though his fingers twitched as if longing to escape. Miss Marple seized a moment to approach Sylvia, her approach as unassuming as a sparrow's. "Miss Vane," she said, her voice gentle, "your generosity is most admirable. A reward may indeed loosen tongues. Have you had any responses yet?" Sylvia's smile was warm, but her eyes flicked over Miss Marple, as if gauging her importance. "Not yet, Miss Marple, but I have hope. The police are pursuing leads, and with the public's help, I'm sure we'll find the thief. It's all so dreadful I scarcely sleep for thinking of it." Miss Marple nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I can imagine such a violation in your own home. You must have been devastated to find the jewel case empty that morning. Did you check it often to ensure the sapphires were safe?" Sylvia's fingers brushed her necklace, a nervous gesture. Oh, every night. I loved to see them sparkle before I slept. That's why I kept the case on my dressing table, though I see now it was foolish. Her voice caught, and she dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her mind was sharp. Quite understandable, my dear. Beauty can be a comfort. And the case, was it always locked, even during the party? Sylvia hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. Yes, of course. I locked it before the guests arrived. The key was in my pocket until I retired. Then I placed it beside the case. I found it under the table later, as I told you, knacked there in the thief's haste, no doubt. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her thoughts raced. The key, so conveniently found, and Sylvia's insistence on her routine felt rehearsed, like lines delivered for effect. She thanked Sylvia and withdrew, her umbrella tapping lightly as she rejoined Mrs. Bantry, who was deep in conversation with the vicar's wife about the scandal's impact on Much Benham's reputation. Dolly, Miss Marple said quietly, drawing her friend aside, I think a visit to Mr. Hodge, the jeweller in Much Benham, might be illuminating. He appraised Miss Vane's sapphires, did he not? A man in his position hears much about his client's affairs. Mrs. Bantry's eyes lit up. Oh, Jane, you're scheming. Of course, Mr. Hodge is a terrible gossip, perfect for our purposes. Shall we go tomorrow? Miss Marple nodded, her mind already planning the encounter. The tea drew to a close, and as the guests dispersed, Sylvia's photograph appeared in the evening edition of the Gazette, her tragic beauty dominating the front page. Mrs. Bantry, reading it over dinner at Gossington Hall, remarked on the actress's sudden fame. She's the talk of the county, Jane. This theft has done wonders for her career, hasn't it? Miss Marple, cutting her lamb with precision, paused. Wonders, indeed. Adversity, Dolly, can be a fine stage for some, but a stage requires props, and I wonder if Miss Vane's sapphires are not props themselves. The next morning, Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry drove to Much Benham, the market town bustling with farmers and shoppers. Mr. Hodge's shop, a narrow establishment wedged between a bakery and a haberdashery, gleamed with polished glass and brass. The jeweller, a portly man with a florid face and a penchant for gold watch chains, greeted them with effusive charm, his eyes twinkling at the prospect of high-profile visitors. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple. What an honor, he said, ushering them into a back room lined with velvet trays of glittering stones. I suppose you're here about Miss Vane's sapphires. A shocking business, shocking. I appraised them myself, you know, flawless stones, Burmese worth a fortune. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her umbrella resting against her knee. So we've heard, Mr. Hodge. It must be distressing to see such fine work stolen. Tell me, were the sapphires insured at your valuation? Mr. Hodge's smile widened, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. Oh yes, and a pretty penny it was. Mr. Gray handled the policy, came to me directly to confirm the figure. £60,000, if you can believe it, with a clause for immediate payout if stolen. Miss Vane was most particular about that clause, insisted on it last month when she increased the coverage. Miss Marple's eyes flickered, though her expression remained placid. Last month, you say? How prudent of her. Was there any reason for the increase? Mr. Hodge leaned closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Between us, ladies, I heard Miss Vane's latest film isn't doing well. Box office receipts down, contract in jeopardy, that sort of thing. She was in here a few weeks ago, looking at new pieces, but talking money troubles. said the sapphires were her security, and she wanted them covered for every penny. I thought it odd, but actresses, you know, they live for drama. Mrs. Bantry gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Money troubles, Sylvia, but she's so glamorous. Miss Marple's smile was faint, her mind cataloguing the revelation. Glamour, Dolly, is often a mask for necessity. Thank you, Mr. Hodge, you've been most helpful. She rose, her movements slow but deliberate, and they left the shop, the jeweller's chatter fading behind them. In the car, Mrs. Bantry was alight with speculation. Jane, did you hear that? Sylvia increased the insurance just before the theft. It's too convenient, isn't it? Do you think she planned it all? Miss Marple gazed out at the passing fields, her thoughts weaving through the new information. Convenience, Dolly, is a dangerous word in a crime. It suggests intent, and intent requires motive. Miss Vane's troubles, financial, professional, may be the backdrop to this drama, but we must be sure of the plot. Back at Gossington Hall, Miss Marple retired to the guest room, her knitting resumed as a way to steady her thoughts. The needles clicked rhythmically, each stitch a step toward clarity. Sylvia's reward, her tears, her pacing at 1A.M. They painted a picture of a woman orchestrating her own narrative. The insurance increase, timed so perfectly, was no coincidence. It was a calculated move, perhaps to secure a payout that could save her faltering career. Yet the footprints, the open window, the found key, they suggested accomplices or misdirection, and Miss Marple was determined to identify the supporting players. She recalled Sylvia's interactions at the tea, the way she'd avoided Clara's gaze, the lingering touch on Ronald's arm, the murmured assurances to Grey. Each hinted at connections, rivalries, loyalties, or schemes that could unravel the theft's true purpose. Elsie's nervousness, too, lingered in her mind. A maid who saw her mistress pacing late at night might know more than she dared say. As evening fell, Mrs. Bantry burst into the room, waving a fresh copy of the Gazette. Jane, look at this. Sylvia's on the front page again, and they're calling her the Sapphire Star. She's announced a charity gala to raise funds for the reward. It's brilliant. She's turning this into a spectacle. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her eyes twinkling. A spectacle, indeed, and a clever one. Miss Vane knows the value of an audience, Dolly, and she plays to it with skill. But every performance has its flaws, and I intend to find hers. Mrs. Bantry laughed, shaking her head. You're incorrigible, Jane. I don't know how you do it, but I'd bet my best brooch you're halfway to solving this already. Miss Marple's smile was serene, her thoughts a quiet whirl of suspicion. Sylvia Vane's mask was flawless, but no mask could hide the truth forever, not from someone who knew where to look. The sapphires, she felt, were not the prize. They were the bait, and the real game was one of ambition, deception, and carefully timed moves. With her gentle persistence, Miss Marple would trace the actress's steps until the curtain fell. Chapter 6. Shadows of Motive. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated Miss Jane Marple's parlour in St. Mary Mead, where she sat with her knitting, the rhythmic click of her needles a counterpoint to the quiet ticking of the mantel clock outside. The village slept under a blanket of stars, but Miss Marple's mind was far from restful. The theft of Sylvia Vane's sapphires, with its theatrical flourish and cast of vivid characters, had woven itself into a complex tapestry, and she was determined to trace each thread to its source. The revelations from Mr. Hodge, the jeweller, had cast a new light on Sylvia's financial straits and the suspiciously timed insurance increase. But Miss Marple knew that a crime of this nature required more than one player. Motives, she had long observed, were like shadows cast by the light of human desire, and often distorted by those who cast them. The morning brought a fresh invitation from Mrs. Dolly Bantry, who had secured a promise from Sylvia to host a small luncheon at the riverside bungalow. "It's a chance to see them all again, Jane," Dolly had said over breakfast at Gossington Hall, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Ronald, Clara, Mr. Grathel, all be there, and I'm dying to know what you'll uncover next. You've got that look, like a cat watching a mouse." Miss Marple's smile was faint, her pale blue eyes twinkling behind their mild facade. "A cat, Dolly? Hardly. I am merely an old lady who notices things. But a luncheon, with all the players gathered, is an excellent opportunity to observe what lies beneath their words. Motive, you see, is rarely spoken, it is shown in glances, in hesitations, in the things left unsaid." The drive to Much Benham was pleasant, the countryside awash in the golden hues of late summer. The riverside bungalow stood as striking as ever, its glass walls catching the sunlight like a prism, its manicured lawn sloping gently to the silver ribbon of the river ben. Harris, the butler, greeted them at the door, his stoic demeanour softened by a polite nod. "Miss Vane is in the dining room, madame," he said to Mrs. Bantry. "The guests are just arriving." The dining room was a vision of modern elegance, with a long glass table set with crystal and silver, and a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation. Sylvia Vane, dressed in a flowing cream blouse and tailored trousers, presided with the grace of a seasoned hostess, though Miss Marple noted a faint tension in her smile, as if the effort of maintaining it was considerable. The guests were few but significant: Ronald Blake, Clara Morton, and Mr. Percival Grey, joined by a local magistrate, Sir Henry Clethering, whom Dolly had invited for his keen interest in criminology. Ronald Blake, seated to Sylvia's right, was in high spirits, his dark hair gleaming under the chandelier's light. His charm was effortless, his anecdotes about film sets drawing laughter from Sir Henry. But Miss Marple observed a restlessness in his movements, a quick glance toward Sylvia whenever her attention strayed. Clara Morton, opposite him, ate with precise, deliberate bites, her sharp eyes darting between Sylvia and Ronald with a mixture of disdain and amusement. Mr. Grey, at the table's end, was as nervous as ever, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he fidgeted with his napkin. Sir Henry, a robust man with a shrewd gaze, listened more than he spoke, his presence a quiet counterpoint to the theatrical trio. Sylvia, raising a glass of white wine, addressed the table. "My dear friends, your support through this dreadful ordeal has been a lifeline. The police are hopeful, and with the reward announced, I feel we're closer to finding my sapphires. Let us toast to truth and to friendship." Her voice was warm, but Miss Marple noted a slight tremor, as if the toast carried a hidden weight. The conversation turned to the theft, with Sir Henry probing gently. "A bold crime, Miss Vane," he said, his tone measured. "A thief who slips into a crowded house and out again, leaving only footprints it's almost too neat. Have you any theories about who might have known the jewel's location?" Sylvia's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "None, Sir Henry. I trusted my guests implicitly. The sapphires were no secret I wore them that night, and everyone admired them. But to think someone betrayed that trust." She shivered, her hand brushing her throat in a gesture Miss Marple recognized as calculated. Miss Marple, sipping her soup, spoke softly. It is curious, is it not, how a thief could navigate such a house unnoticed? The bungalow is so open, so exposed. Mr. Blake, you were among the last to leave, I understand. Did you notice anyone lingering near the staircase? Ronald's laugh was quick, but his eyes flicked to Sylvia. Me. I was too busy playing the gallant, Miss Marple's courting ladies to their taxis, that sort of thing. The staircase was clear, far as I recall, but it was a mad house, people everywhere, music blaring. A thief could have slipped through, I suppose. His tone was light, but Miss Marple noted a tightness in his jaw, a sign of unease. Clara Morton snorted, setting down her spoon. A thief, or someone closer to home. Sylvia, you've always had a knack for attracting trouble. Those sapphires were a magnet for envy, must have known that. Her voice was sharp, and Sylvia's smile froze, though she managed a laugh. Clara, you do love your dramatics, Sylvia said, her tone playful but edged. I've no enemies, only rivals, and I hope they're above such pettiness. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to Mr. Gray, who had been silent, his fingers twisting his napkin into knots. Mr. Gray, she said, her voice gentle, you knew the sapphires' value better than most, having insured them. Did Miss Vane ever express concern about their safety before the theft? Gray started, his spectacles glinting as he adjusted them. Concern, well, she was prudent, as any client would be. We discussed the policy at length, security measures, that sort of thing. She was keen to ensure full coverage, especially after the appraisal. But no specific worries. His voice was strained, and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes darted to Sylvia. Seeking her reaction. Sir Henry, sensing the undercurrent, leaned forward. Full coverage, you say? A substantial sum, I imagine. Insurance firms must dread such claims, especially in a case with so few leads. Gray's smile was thin, almost pained. We manage, Sir Henry. My firm is committed to supporting Miss Vane, whatever the cost. It's our duty, after all. He excused himself to fetch a glass of water, his departure hasty. Mrs. Bantry, whispering to Miss Marple, could barely contain her excitement. Jane, he's practically squirming. And Clara's daggers at Sylvia. There's bad blood there, I'd swear it. What are you thinking? Miss Marple's expression remained serene, but her mind was a whirl of connections. I am thinking, Dolly, that motives are like shadows, they shift with the light. We must find the source of the light to see them clearly. She turned her attention to the servants, who moved silently around the table. Elsie, clearing plates, avoided eye contact, her hands trembling slightly. Harris, pouring wine, maintained his stoic calm, but Miss Marple caught a fleeting glance he exchanged with Sylvia, a moment of unspoken understanding. After luncheon, the guests drifted to the lawn, where Sylvia had arranged chairs beneath a willow tree. Miss Marple, declining a seat, strolled toward the garden's edge, her umbrella tapping the grass. Ronald Blake followed, perhaps sensing an opportunity to charm the unassuming old lady. You're quite the detective, Miss Marple, he said, his smile boyish. Got any theories about our thief? Miss Marple paused, her gaze on the river's gentle flow. Theories, Mr. Blake, are premature without facts. But I am curious about you. The film world must be demanding, with so much at stake. A scandal like this, might it help or harm a career? Ronald's laugh was brittle, his eyes narrowing. Help, if you play it right. Sylvia's getting headlines, isn't she? Me, I'm just her leading man, trying to keep up. but I'd never stoop to theft, if that's what you're thinking. I need her good graces too much." His candor was disarming, but Miss Marple noted the edge in his voice, the hint of desperation. "Need," she said softly, "is a powerful motive, but loyalty too can blind us. You're fond of Miss Vane, I think." Ronald flushed, his charm faltering. "Fond? Sure, she's a star, but it's professional, nothing more. Look, I've got a rehearsal to get to, excuse me." He strode off, his shoulders tense, and Miss Marple watched him go, her thoughts turning to his restless energy, his dependence on Sylvia's favour. Clara Morton, meanwhile, had cornered Mrs. Bantry near the jetty, her voice low but venomous. Miss Marple, approaching quietly, caught fragments of their conversation. "Sylvia's no victim," Clara was saying, her hands clenched. "She sabotaged my last place-bred rumours, turned the producers against me. She'd do anything for attention, even stage a theft. Those sapphires, probably tucked in her wardrobe, waiting for the next act." Mrs. Bantry, wide-eyed, glanced at Miss Marple as she joined them. "Clara, that's a serious accusation. Jane, what do you think?" Miss Marple's smile was placid, her tone gentle. "Miss Morton, you know Miss Vane well, it seems. Such rivalry must be trying. Did you see anything that night, perhaps, someone near her room that might support your suspicions?" Clara's lips curled, but her eyes were wary. "I saw nothing, Miss Marple. I was in the library, avoiding Sylvia's circus. But I know her type, scheming, always scheming. If you want the truth, look at her, not some phantom thief." She turned abruptly, striding back to the bungalow, her black dress stark against the green lawn. Miss Marple's gaze followed her, then shifted to the bungalow's glass walls, where Sylvia stood framed, watching the scene. The actress's expression was unreadable, but her fingers gripped the curtain tightly, a small betrayal of her composure. Miss Marple filed it away, her thoughts turning to Mr. Gray, who had yet to rejoin the group. She found him in the study, a small room lined with books and papers, where Harris was delivering a tray of coffee. Gray was riffling through a folder, his movements jerky, and he started when Miss Marple entered. "Oh, Miss Marple, I was just checking some documents. Insurance matters, you know." His voice was too quick, his smile too forced. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her umbrella across her knees. "Of course, Mr. Gray. It must be a heavy responsibility, handling such a claim. I understand you visited Miss Vane before the theft, to discuss the policy's terms." Gray's fingers froze, then resumed their fidgeting. "Yes, a routine visit. She wanted to adjust the coverage standard procedure. We met here, in this room, a few days before the party. Nothing unusual." His eyes avoided hers, and Miss Marple noted the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. Harris, lingering by the door, cleared his throat. "Shall I fetch more coffee, sir?" he asked, his tone neutral but his gaze fixed on Gray. "No, thank you, Harris," Gray said, waving him off. The butler withdrew, but Miss Marple caught the slight hesitation in his step, as if he were reluctant to leave. She turned back to Gray, her voice soft but probing. "And during that visit, Mr. Gray, did Miss Vane seem anxious about the sapphires? Or perhaps about other matters?" Gray's spectacles slipped, and he pushed them up with a trembling hand. Anxious, no, she was. Confident, eager to ensure the policy was airtight. Actresses, you know, they like their treasures secure. He laughed, a dry, nervous sound, and stood abruptly. "I must speak with Miss Vanix, excuse me." Miss Marple watched him go, her mind cataloguing his evasions, his unease, the butler's subtle vigilance. She rose, her steps slow as she wandered the study, her eyes scanning the shelves. A ledger, half hidden behind a vase, caught her attention, but she left it untouched, knowing Harris's watchful presence would note any intrusion. Instead, she rejoined Mrs. Bantry on the lawn, where Sir Henry was discussing the case with Sylvia, his questions polite but incisive, as the luncheon party dispersed. Miss Marple declined a lift from Sir Henry, choosing to walk with Dolly along the river path. The afternoon was warm, the air heavy with the scent of grass and water, and Dolly was bursting with theories. Jane, it's a nest of vipers. Ronald's desperate, Clara's vicious, and Gray's hiding something. Did you see how he bolted? And Sylvia, playing the saint, while they all circle her like sharks. What's your next move? Miss Marple's umbrella tapped the path, her gaze on the river's lazy flow. My next move, Dolly, is to listen. Motive is a shadow cast by ambition, envy, or fear. Ronald seeks fame, Clara revenge, Gray perhaps survival. Sylvia directs the play, but the others have their roles. We must watch for the moment they forget their lines. Dolly laughed, shaking her head. You're impossible, Jane. But I'll bet you're closer to the truth than Crane and his footprints. What about Harris? He's like a ghost, always watching. Miss Marple's smile was serene, her thoughts a quiet whirl of suspicion. Harris, Dolly, sees more than he says, as good butlers do, and what he sees may yet light the shadows. Motive, like a thread, unravels when pulled gently, but we must pull with care. As they reached Gossington Hall, Miss Marple's mind was already planning her next steps. A quiet word with Elsie, a closer look at Gray's firm, a deeper probe into Sylvia's past. The riverside bungalow, she felt, was a house of mirrors, reflecting distorted truths. With her gentle persistence, she would find the one truth that cast the shadows and bring it into the light. Chapter 7. The footprints' tail, the morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, veiling the village in a soft, silvery haze that muffled the clatter of milk carts and the chatter of early risers. Miss Jane Marple, seated by her parlour window with a cup of tea, gazed out at the shrouded garden, her thoughts as clear and sharp as the knitting needles that lay idle in their basket. The theft of Sylvia Vane's sapphires at the riverside bungalow had grown more intricate with each revelation, and the luncheon at the bungalow had deepened her conviction that the crime was a carefully staged performance. Ronald Blake's desperation, Clara Morton's bitterness, Mr. Gray's evasions, and Sylvia's calculated poise all pointed to a web of motives. But it was the physical evidence, the footprints, the window, the key that held the key to the truth. Miss Marple, with her knack for seeing through artifice, was determined to unravel their tale. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, ever her enthusiastic ally, had telephoned the previous evening with news that Inspector Crane was planning another search of the bungalow's grounds, prompted by a tip from a local gardener who claimed to have seen something odd near the riverbank on the night of the theft. Jane, you must come, Dolly had insisted, her voice brimming with excitement. Crane's poking about again, and Sylvia's in a state. She says the police are ruining her lawn. It's bound to be revealing. Miss Marple, sensing a chance to re-examine the scene, had agreed, though her interest lay less in the gardener's tip than in the footprints themselves, which had nagged at her since her first visit. The drive to Much Benham was brisk, the mist lifting to reveal a sky of pale blue and fields dappled with sunlight. The riverside bungalow gleamed as they approached, its glass walls reflecting the river's shimmer like a polished mirror. Inspector Crane was already there, his ruddy face set in a frown as he directed to constables near the bedroom window. Sylvia Vane stood on the lawn, wrapped in a fur-trimmed coat despite the mild weather, her auburn hair catching the light as she gestured animatedly to Harris, the butler, who nodded with his usual stoic calm. Elsie, the maid, hovered near the jetty, her anxious eyes darting between Sylvia and the police. Mrs. Bantry, stepping from the car, waved to Sylvia with a cheery smile. "Sylvia, dear, what a to-do. Jane and I couldn't resist coming to see the latest. Has Crane found anything new?" Sylvia's smile was tight, her voice tinged with exasperation. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you're too kind to take such an interest. The inspector's tearing up my garden over some nonsense from a gardener who probably saw a fox. It's all so tiresome, I just want my sapphires back." Her hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture Miss Marple recognized as both. Practiced and revealing, Miss Marple inclined her head, her black umbrella tapping lightly on the gravel. "I quite understand, Miss Vane. It must be distressing to have your home disrupted. Perhaps I might look at the bedroom again. The footprints, you see, are such a curious detail." Her tone was gentle, but her pale blue eyes were keen, missing nothing in Sylvia's fleeting frown. Inspector Crane, overhearing, approached with a nod. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Bantry, you're welcome to look, though I doubt there's much new to see. The footprints are our best lead, muddy, size 10, leading from the window to the lawn. We're checking the riverbank now, based on this gardener's story. He says he saw a shadow moving near the jetty around 3 a.m., but it's likely nothing." His tone was brisk, but Miss Marple detected a hint of frustration, as if the case's complexities were wearing on his patience. Sylvia led them upstairs, her fur coat brushing the polished steps with a soft whisper. The bedroom was unchanged, the satin-draped bed, the mirrored dressing table, the wide window with its view of the river. The footprints on the grey carpet, now protected by a rope barrier, were fainter but still visible, their smudged edges a silent challenge. Miss Marple knelt, with some effort, to study them closely, her gloved hand hovering over the marks. The mud was dry, a faint brown stain, but the prints were uneven, some deep, others barely there, as if the intruder had tiptoed or hesitated. She noted their abrupt end at the carpet's edge, where the hardwood floor showed no trace of dirt. Rising, she turned to the window, pushing it open to test its movement. The hinges, as before, moved silently, and the latch gleamed without a scratch. She peered at the frame, running a finger along its edge. The wood was pristine, unmarred by the slightest nick. "A thief," she murmured, "would need remarkable skill to climb through here without a mark. And the mud such a small amount for a man in haste." Her voice was soft, almost as if she spoke to herself. But Crane, standing nearby, bristled slightly. "We've been over the window, Miss Marple," he said, his mustache twitching. "No forced entry, which suggests the thief knew the house, or had help. The mud matches the garden's soil-clear evidence he came this way." His tone was confident, but Miss Marple's faint smile suggested she was not entirely convinced. She stepped back, her gaze drifting to the dressing table, where the empty jewel case sat among a clutter of perfume bottles. The key, which Sylvia had claimed to find under the table, was absent, likely in police custody. "Miss Vane," Miss Marple said, turning to the actress, "you mentioned the footprints were the first thing you noticed that morning. Were they as clear then as they are now?" Sylvia's fingers tightened on her coat, a fleeting sign of unease. Oh yes, quite clear. I saw them, at once horrible muddy marks all over my carpet. I screamed, of course, and Harris came running. It was such a shock, knowing someone had been in my room. Her voice trembled, but Miss Marple noted the careful modulation. Like a line delivered for effect, Miss Marple nodded, her expression sympathetic. How dreadful. And the window, was it wide open, or just ajar? Sylvia hesitated, her eyes flickering. Ajar, I think. Enough for someone to slip through, but not so much as to notice at night. I was so tired, I didn't check. Before bed. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. A gesture Miss Marple found increasingly familiar. Mrs. Bantry, peering at the footprints, shivered. It's like a ghost story, Jane. A shadowy figure, creeping in and out, leaving only these marks. What do you make of them? Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her mind was racing. They tell a story, Dolly, but not the one we're meant to read. Footprints, you see, are like words, they can be written to deceive. She thanked Sylvia and Crane, then descended to the lawn, her umbrella tapping rhythmically as she approached. The window's exterior. The soil beneath was soft, as Crane had noted, but the marks were shallow, barely denting the earth. She recalled her experiment in her own garden, pressing her shoe into damp soil. The impression had been deep, unmistakable. These prints, by contrast, seemed tentative, as if made with care rather than haste. She knelt again, ignoring the damp grass on her skirt, and studied the soil closely. The marks were smeared, some overlapping, as if the intruder had shuffled. Rather than stepped, she rose, brushing her hands, and walked to the lawn's edge, where the trail faded into the grass. The garden gate, locked with a key kept indoors, stood 50 yards away, its iron bars unmarred by scratches or mud. A thief, she murmured, would need wings to cross this lawn without a trace. Inspector Crane, joining her, pointed to the riverbank. We're focusing there now. The gardener's tip shadow by the jetty might mean the thief escaped by boat. No prints, but the current could have washed them away. His tone was hopeful, but Miss Marple's faint shake of her head suggested skepticism. Perhaps, she said, her voice mild, but a boat at 3 a.m. in a quiet village would draw notice, and the footprints they stop so abruptly. It is curious. She turned to Harris, who stood nearby, his arms crossed. Mr. Harris, you were the first to see the footprints, I believe. Did you notice anything unusual about them when you entered the room? Harris's expression remained impassive, but his eyes flicked to Sylvia, who was speaking with a constable. Unusual, ma'am. They were muddy, out of place in Miss Vane's room. I didn't study them closely, my concern was for her safety. His voice was steady, but Miss Marple noted a slight tightening of his jaw, a sign of guardedness. She nodded, filing away his response. Of course, it must have been a shock, and the window frame that you inspected that morning, Harris shook his head. No, ma'am. The police handled that. I was busy calming Miss Vane and securing the house. His tone was polite, but Miss Marple sensed a reluctance to elaborate. Mrs. Bantry, catching up, whispered excitedly, Jane, you're like a bloodhound. Those footprints, they're not right, are they? Too neat, or too messy, or something. What's your theory? Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her thoughts were a whirl of suspicion. A theory, Dolly, is premature. But I will say this. Footprints are a message, and these were meant to be read a certain way. We must find the hand that wrote them. She turned to Elsie, who was lingering by the jetty, her apron twisted in her hands. "Elsie, my dear," Miss Marple called, her tone grandmotherly. "Might I have a word?" Elsie approached, her pale face flushed with nervousness. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, her eyes darting to Sylvia. Miss Marple's voice was soothing, designed to ease the girl's fears. "You've had a trying time, haven't you? All this police business, upsetting the house. I understand you cleaned the window frame the morning after the theft, on Miss Vane's orders. Can you tell me why?" Elsie's hands trembled, and she glanced at the ground. "Miss Vane said it was smudged, ma'am. She didn't want it looking dirty when the police came. I wiped it down quick, with a cloth, before Inspector Crane arrived. I didn't think nothing of it." Her voice was barely audible, and Miss Marple noted the way her shoulders hunched, as if bracing for reproach. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her expression remained gentle. "Smudged, you say? How thoughtful of Miss Vane to notice, in such a moment. And the cloth, where is it now?" Elsie's flush deepened. I threw it in the wash, ma'am. It was just a rag, nothing special. I didn't know it mattered." Her voice cracked, and she looked close to tears. Miss Marple patted her arm, her touch reassuring. There, my dear. You did as you were told. Thank you for being so honest." She watched Elsie scurry back to the bungalow, her mind cataloguing the maid's fear, Sylvia's peculiar request, and the missing cloth that might have held traces of the truth. Inspector Crane, finishing his instructions to the constables, approached with a sigh. "No luck on the riverbank, Miss Marple. The gardener's story's a bust. Probably just a drunk guest stumbling about. We're back to the footprints and the window. I'm leaning toward an inside job. Now someone at the party, maybe with a grudge." Miss Marple nodded, her tone placating. "A reasonable theory, Inspector. But the footprints, they are not what they seem. Have you considered their artistry? They are too deliberate, too staged, for a thief in flight." She paused, then added, "Might I suggest testing the soil again? A comparison of its weight, its texture, could confirm their origin." Crane blinked, caught off guard. "Well, we've matched the mud to the garden, but I suppose we could dig deeper. I'll have the lads take samples." His tone was grudging, but Miss Marple's gentle smile suggested she was satisfied. As they prepared to leave, Sylvia approached, her fur coat slipping slightly to reveal a silk scarf. "Miss Marple, you're so kind to take such an interest," she said, her voice warm but strained. "Do you think the police are close to finding my sapphires? I'm at my wit's end." Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her voice soft. "I'm sure they are doing their best, Miss Vane, but the truth, like a footprint, leaves its mark, however carefully it is made. We shall find it in time." Sylvia's smile wavered, and Miss Marple noted the faint tightening of her fingers, a sign of unease beneath the actress's polished dot. In the car back to Gossington Hall, Mrs. Bantry was alight with speculation. "Jane, those footprints there are fake, aren't they? Planted to fool Crane. And Sylvia telling Elsie to clean the window, that's suspicious, isn't it? You're onto her, I can tell." Miss Marple's umbrella rested across her knees, her gaze on the passing fields. "Suspicion, Dolly, is like a loose stitch. It must be secured before it unravels the whole. The footprints were made with care, not haste, and the window's cleanliness is a chapter in itself. Sylvia's role is central, but the tale is not hers alone." Her voice was calm, but her mind was a quiet whirl of connections. Elsie's fear, Harris's vigilance, The shallow prints, the wiped frame, each was a clue, a word in the footprint's tale, and she intended to read it to its end. Back at Gossington Hall, over a late tea, Dolly pressed for details. "Come on, Jane, give me something. You're seeing things I can't. What's next? Are you going to confront Sylvia?" Miss Marple sipped her tea, her smile serene. "Confrontation, Dolly, is for the final act. For now, we observe, we listen, we test. The footprints tell a story of deception, but the author is still hidden. We must follow their trail, step by step, until the truth steps into the light." Dolly laughed, shaking her head. "You're maddening, Jane, but I wouldn't bet against you. Those sapphires are as good as found, aren't they?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her thoughts already planning her next move. A discreet inquiry into Elsie's duties, a closer look at Harris's loyalties, a probe into the soil's secrets. The riverside bungalow, she felt, was a stage of carefully placed props, and the footprints were its script, written to mislead. With her gentle persistence, she would rewrite the tale, revealing the hand that had left its mark. Chapter 8. The Insurance Game. The pale light of a late summer dawn crept through the curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead, casting delicate shadows across the parlour where she sat with her morning tea. Her knitting, usually a constant companion, lay untouched in its basket, for her mind was wholly occupied with the intricate puzzle of the riverside bungalow theft. The sapphires, the footprints, Sylvia Vane's theatrical distress were pieces of a carefully constructed drama, but it was Mr. Percival Gray, the nervous insurance agent, who had begun to occupy her thoughts. His evasions at the luncheon, his hasty departure from the study, and his role in the suspiciously timed insurance increase suggested a deeper involvement, one that Miss Marple was determined to uncover. Motives, she knew, were often cloaked in the mundane, and an insurance policy, with its dry figures and clauses, could conceal a wealth of intrigue. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, ever eager for the next act in the saga, had arranged for them to visit Much Benham again, this time to call on Sir Henry Clithering, the retired magistrate who had joined the bungalow's luncheon. Sir Henry, with his connections in London, had offered to share what he knew of Gray's insurance firm, prompted by Dolly's enthusiastic recounting of Miss Marple's sleuthing. "Jane," Dolly had said over the telephone, her voice bubbling with excitement, "Sir Henry says Gray's firm is in trouble, financial trouble. It's bound to mean something. You'll come, won't you? We'll get to the bottom of this insurance business." Miss Marple, sensing an opportunity to probe Gray's role, had agreed, though her interest lay not only in the firm's finances, but in the subtle interplay of loyalty and desperation that surrounded Sylvia's claim. She dressed carefully, choosing a neat black coat and her trusty umbrella, which served as both prop and cane. As she waited for Dolly's car, she glanced at the Much Benham Gazette, which featured yet another article on Sylvia's reward and her upcoming charity. Gala, the actress's face, luminous and tragic, dominated the page, and Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. Publicity, she thought, was a powerful motive, but money insurance money was a colder, sharper one. The drive to Much Benham was swift, the countryside a blur of golden fields and hedgerows under a sky of unbroken blue. Sir Henry house, a handsome Georgian affair on the town's outskirts, was surrounded by manicured gardens, its red brick facade glowing in the morning light. Sir Henry greeted them at the door, his robust frame and shrewd eyes softened by a warm smile. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, ushering them into a book-lined study. You're here to pick my brains about this bungalow business, I presume. A fascinating case straight out of one of Agatha's novels, eh? Mrs. Bantry laughed, settling into a leather armchair. Oh, Sir Henry, it's better than a novel. Jane's got half the puzzle solved already, I'm sure. But we need your help with Mr. Gray. Dolly says his firm's in trouble. What's the story? Miss Marple, seated by a window with her umbrella across her knees, smiled faintly. You are too kind, Dolly. I am merely an old lady who notices things. Sir Henry, we are most grateful for your insights. Mr. Gray's role in ensuring Miss Vane's sapphires seems pivotal, and any light you can shed on his circumstances would be most helpful. Sir Henry poured tea from a silver pot, his movements deliberate. Gray's firm, Marchmont and Sons, is a small outfit, been around for decades, but struggling lately. I had a word with a friend in the city discreetly, of course. Seems they've taken some bad risks, overinsured a few high-profile clients, and now they're teetering on the edge. A claim like Miss Vane's £60,000, I hear, could sink them. Unless they've got reserves, they're not advertising. Gray's been under pressure to keep clients happy while staving off creditors. Not a pleasant spot for a man like him. Miss Marple's eyes flickered, though her expression remained serene. How interesting. And yet, Mr. Gray has been most eager to expedite Miss Vane's claim, despite the cost to his firm. One might expect delay or scrutiny in such circumstances. Sir. Henry nodded, his gaze sharpening. Exactly. My friend mentioned Gray's been pushing for quick payouts, which is odd for a firm in distress. Either he's desperate to keep Miss Vane as a client, or there's something else at play, maybe a personal stake. He's been seen at the bungalow more than you'd expect for routine business, hasn't he? Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her eyes wide. Oh yes. He was there at the luncheon, fidgeting like a schoolboy caught cheating, and Jane caught him rifling through papers in the study, didn't you, Jane? Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her mind was cataloguing Sir Henry's words. I merely observed him in the study, Dolly, looking rather preoccupied. Sir Henry, do you know if Miss Vane's policy was unusual in any way? Mr. Hodge, the jeweller, mentioned she increased the coverage just before the theft at Mr. Gray's. Urging Sir Henry's eyebrows rose. Did she? Now, that's telling. My friend didn't mention specifics, but a last-minute increase, especially on a policy that size, would raise eyebrows. It's not unheard of, but it's risky smacks of foreknowledge, if you're cynical. Gray would have had to sign off on it, which puts him in a delicate position if the claim's questioned. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her thoughts weaving through the implications. A firm in financial straits, a nervous agent, a sudden policy hike. They painted a picture of calculated risk, with Sylvia and Gray at its center. She recalled Gray's evasive answers, his nervous tics, and Harris's watchful presence in the study. The butler, she suspected, knew more than he let on, and his loyalty to Sylvia might hold the key to Gray's involvement. Their visit concluded with Sir Henry promising to make further inquiries in London, and Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry drove to the riverside bungalow, where Sylvia had invited them for a brief call. She's planning her gala, Dolly said, her voice brimming with excitement. The whole county's talking about it, such a spectacle. But I'll bet you're more interested in Gray than her guest list, aren't you, Jane? Miss Marple's smile was placid, her umbrella tapping the car floor. Spectacles, Dolly, are often distractions. Mr. Gray's role is quieter, but no less significant. We must see how he fits into Miss Vane's script. The bungalow was abuzz with activity. Servants bustling to prepare for the gala. Sylvia greeted them in the drawing room, her cream silk dress a soft contrast to the room's stark elegance. Her smile was radiant, but Miss Marple noted a faint strain in her eyes, as if the weight of her public persona was growing heavy. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, her voice warm, "your angels to visit again. This gala is keeping me sane planning. It gives me something to focus on besides my poor sapphires." Mrs. Bantry, ever enthusiastic, launched into questions about the gala's menu. But Miss Marple's attention was drawn to Mr. Gray, who stood by the piano, sorting through a stack of papers. His spectacles slipped down his nose, and his fingers trembled slightly, betraying his unease. She approached him quietly, her umbrella tapping the floor like a metronome. "Mr. Gray," she said, her tone grandmotherly, "you must be terribly busy with Miss Vane's claim. It's so kind of you to give it such personal attention." Gray started, nearly dropping his papers. "Oh, Miss Marple, yes, well, it's my duty, you know. Miss Vane's a valued client, and we want to resolve this quickly." His voice was too quick, his smile too forced, and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes darted to Sylvia, who was laughing with Mrs. Bantry. Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her voice soft. "Of course, such a large claim must be a strain on your firm, especially with the recent adjustments to the policy. I understand you advised Miss Vane to increase the coverage shortly before the theft." Gray's fingers froze, and he adjusted his spectacles with a trembling hand. "Advised, well, I suggested it might be prudent, given the sapphire's value." She agreed. "Naturally, she's a cautious lady. It's standard practice, really." His laugh was dry, and Miss Marple noted the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. She nodded, her expression sympathetic. "How diligent of you. And your visit to the bungalow before the party to discuss those adjustments, was it a lengthy meeting?" "I imagine Miss Vane had many questions." Gray's eyes flickered, and he glanced toward the door, as if longing to escape. "Not lengthy, no. A half-hour, perhaps, in the study. We went over the terms, signed the papers, and that was that. Routine business." His voice was strained, and Miss Marple sensed a lie beneath his words, like a crack in a polished surface. Before she could press further, Sylvia approached, her smile bright but her eyes wary. "Mr. Gray, are you boring Miss Marple with insurance talk? Come, you must join us for tea. She's planned a marvelous gala, hasn't she?" Her hand rested lightly on Gray's arm, a gesture that seemed to steady him, and Miss Marple noted the subtle exchange of glances, a silent communication she couldn't yet decipher. They moved to the dining room, where Elsie served tea with her usual nervous haste. Miss Marple watched the maid closely, noting her avoidance of Sylvia's gaze and the way her hands trembled as she poured. Harris, standing by the door, maintained his stoic calm, but his eyes followed Gray with a quiet intensity that Miss Marple found intriguing. She recalled his hesitation in the study, his watchful presence during Gray's fumbling with papers. A butler, she knew, saw everything, and Harris's loyalty to Sylvia might extend to guarding her secrets or exposing those of others over tea. Sylvia spoke animatedly about the gala, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of a performer. "It's for charity, of course," she said, her eyes sparkling, "but I hope it will also draw attention to the theft. Someone, somewhere, knows where my sapphires are, and I mean to find them." Her passion was convincing, but Miss Marple noted a flicker of calculation, as if the gala were another scene in her carefully directed play. Mrs. Bantry, enthralled, pressed for details. Sylvia, it sounds divine. Will Ronald be there? And Clara? I imagine they're thrilled to support you. Sylvia's smile tightened briefly. Ronald, yes, he's promised to perform a scene from our latest film. Clara, well, she's rather busy with her writing, but I've invited her. Mr. Gray's been a dear, helping with the finances. Haven't you, Percival? Her use of his first name was casual, but Miss Marple noted Gray's flush, a sign of familiarity that went beyond professional courtesy. Gray mumbled agreement, his fingers twisting his napkin. Miss Marple, seizing the moment, turned to him. Mr. Gray, your firm must be under great strain with such a claim pending. Have there been other losses recently? I imagine a theft like this could unsettle your clients. Gray's spectacles slipped, and he pushed them up with a jerky motion. Losses? Oh, the usual ups and downs. We're managing, Miss Marple. Miss Vane's claim is exceptional, but we're prepared. I've assured her of a swift settlement. His voice was tight, and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes avoided hers, seeking Sylvia's instead. Sylvia's laugh was light, but her gaze was sharp. Percival's a miracle worker. Without him, I'd be lost. Now, let's talk of happier things, the gala's menu, perhaps. She steered the conversation away, but Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on Gray's unease, his eagerness to settle. A claim that could ruin his firm. As the visit drew to a close, Miss Marple lingered in the drawing room, her umbrella tapping the floor as she studied the piano, where a photograph of Sylvia and Ronald in costume caught her eye. The actress's smile was radiant, but Ronald's expression held a hint of strain, a reminder of his dependence on her favor. She recalled Clara's accusation that Sylvia would stage a theft for attention and Gray's nervous assurances. So at odds with his firm's plight. The insurance game, she thought, was one of high stakes, and Sylvia was not playing alone. In the car back to Gossington Hall, Mrs. Bantry was alight with speculation. Jane, Gray's in it up to his neck, isn't he? Pushing that claim when his firm's on the rock sits, fishy. And Sylvia, calling him Percival, there's something between them. I'd bet my best hat. What's your next move? Miss Marple's gaze was fixed on the passing river, its surface smooth but hiding currents beneath. My next move, Dolly, is to watch. The insurance game is one of trust and betrayal, and Mr. Gray is caught in its rules. Sylvia directs the play, but Gray's role is crucial. We must see if he breaks under the spotlight. Back at Gossington Hall, over a late luncheon, Dolly pressed for more. Come on, Jane, give me a hint. You're thinking Sylvia and Gray cooked this up, aren't you? The insurance money, the publicity, it's all too perfect. Miss Marple sliced her chicken with precision, her smile serene. Perfection, Dolly, is often the flaw in a deception. The insurance claim is a thread, and Gray is its knot. But there are others, Ronald, Clara, even Harris and Elsie, who hold pieces of the pattern. We must pull gently, lest the whole unravels too soon. Dolly laughed, shaking her head. You're maddening, Jane, but I know you're close to cracking this. Gray's the key, isn't he? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her thoughts already, planning her next steps. A discreet inquiry into Gray's firm, a closer look at Sylvia's gala, a gentle probe of Harris's observations. The riverside bungalow, she felt, was a house of calculated risks, and the insurance game was its heart. With her quiet persistence, she would expose the players and their stakes until the truth lay bare. Chapter 9. The Party's Secrets. The soft glow of twilight settled over St. Mary Mead, casting a gentle veil over the village's cottages and gardens as Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, her knitting needles clicking with a steady rhythm that belied the whirl of her thoughts. The theft of Sylvia Vane's sapphires at the riverside bungalow had grown ever more intricate, each new revelation adding depth to the puzzle. Mr. Gray's nervous complicity in the insurance scheme, Sylvia's calculated publicity, and the smudged footprints had all pointed to a staged crime. But Miss Marple knew that the truth lay in the human details, the fleeting moments, the unguarded glances that had unfolded during the fateful party. To unravel the deception, she needed to reconstruct that night, not through Sylvia's dramatic account, but through the quieter voices of those who had been present. Mrs. Dolly Bantrieva, her enthusiastic partner in sleuthing, had proposed a bold plan over breakfast at Gossington Hall. "Jane," she had said, her eyes sparkling with mischief, "we must talk to the guests from the party, those writers and actors who haven't been in the spotlight. They'll have seen things Sylvia and her circle won't admit. I've invited a few to tea tomorrow, casual of course, just to chat about the gala. You'll come, won't you? I know you'll ferret out something." Miss Marple, recognizing the value of such a gathering, had agreed, though her interest lay less in the gallus glamour than in the secrets the guests might unwittingly reveal. The tea was to be held at Gossington Hall, a setting less imposing than the bungalow and thus more likely to loosen tongues. As Miss Marple prepared for the day, dressing in her neat black coat and securing her hat with a pin, she reviewed the clues that had emerged. Elsie's admission of cleaning the window frame, Harris's watchful presence, and Gray's eagerness to settle the claim all suggested a conspiracy with Sylvia at its heart. Yet the party itself, its chaos, its egos, its hidden tensions, held the key to how the theft had been orchestrated. Miss Marple, with her knack for seeing through human artifice, was determined to piece together its secrets. The afternoon was warm. The gardens of Gossington Hall fragrant with roses and lavender as the guests arrived. Dolly had invited a select group from the party: Mr. Lawrence Trent, a novelist known for his florid prose; Miss Evelyn Ward, an aspiring actress who had played a minor role in Sylvia's film; and Dr. Philip Hayworth, a local physician who had attended as a friend of Sir Henry. The trio, less central to Sylvia's circle than Ronald, Clara, or Gray, offered a fresh perspective, and Miss Marple hoped their observations would illuminate the night's hidden currents. The drawing room was a picture of comfort, with armchairs, a crackling fire, and a table laden with scones and cucumber sandwiches. Mrs. Bantry, in a vibrant green dress, played the gracious hostess, her chatter filling the room with warmth. Miss Marple, seated by the window with her umbrella at her side, appeared as an unassuming old lady, her pale blue eyes soft but missing nothing. She listened as the guests exchanged pleasantries, noting their postures, their tones, the subtle shifts in their expressions. Lawrence Trent, a portly man with a penchant for loud waistcoats, held court with a tale of his latest novel, his voice booming with self-importance. Evelyn Ward, a slight young woman with nervous hands and wide, eager eyes, hung on his every word, her admiration tinged with ambition. Dr. Hayworth, lean and reserved, sipped his tea in silence, his sharp gaze drifting between his companions, as if diagnosing their motives. Miss Marple, offering a plate of scones, began her gentle probing. "Mr. Trent," she said, her voice mild, "you must have attended many grand parties in your literary career. Miss Vane's, I understand, was quite the affair. Did anything strike you as unusual that night, amidst all the revelry?" Trent, flattered by the attention, puffed out his chest. "Unusual? Well, It was a lively crowd, actors, writers, all vying for the spotlight. Sylvia was in her element, dazzling everyone with those sapphires. But I did notice her slip upstairs around one, which seemed odd. She'd been the life of the party till then. I thought she might be checking on something, but she was back soon enough, all smiles. His tone was casual, but Miss Marple noted the detail, a confirmation of Elsie's account of Sylvia's late-night pacing. Mrs. Bantry, pouring tea, leaned forward. Upstairs at one. How curious. Was she alone, Mr. Trent? Or did someone follow her? Trent frowned, stroking his moustache. Alone, as far as I saw. The staircase is so open, you'd notice anyone trailing her. Mind you, I was distracted. Devlin here was telling me about her latest audition. He winked at the young actress, who blushed and looked down. Miss Marple turned to Evelyn, her smile grandmotherly. Miss Ward, you must have been thrilled to be at such an event. A young actress among such companies, quite an opportunity. Did you see Miss Vane upstairs, or perhaps near her room, during the evening? Evelyn's fingers twisted her napkin, her voice hesitant. I didn't see her upstairs, Miss Marple. I was mostly in the drawing room, dancing or chatting, but I did see her later, near the study, whispering with Mr. Gray. It was past 1. I think the party was winding down. They looked serious, like they didn't want to be overheard. Her eyes darted to Trent, as if seeking approval, and Miss Marple noted her nervousness, a sign she was unaccustomed to scrutiny. Dr. Hayworth, stirring his tea, spoke for the first time, his voice calm but precise. I noticed that, too. Sylvia and Gray, in the study doorway, just after 1. I was fetching my coat from the hall, ready to leave. They stopped talking when they saw me, and Sylvia laughed it off, but Gray looked rattled. I thought it was just business insurance talk, perhaps, but it stuck with me. His gaze met Miss Marple's, and she sensed a kindred sharpness, a mind that observed as keenly as her own. Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands, delighted. Jane, isn't this marvellous? Sylvia sneaking about, whispering with Grates, all so suspicious. What do you make of it? Miss Marple's smile was faint, her thoughts cataloguing the new details. It is illuminating. Dolly, a hostess, who leaves her party to pace or confer, is not at ease, and a private word with Mr. Gray suggests more than casual business. Dr. Hayworth, did you notice anyone else near the study, or perhaps the staircase, at that hour? Hayworth leaned back, his fingers steepled. The staircase was quiet by then. Most guests were on the lawn or in the drawing room. But I did see Ronald Blake lingering near the hall, watching Sylvia as she spoke with Gray. He looked tense, not his usual charming self. I assumed it was jealousy or some professional spat. Actors, you know, they thrive on drama. His tone was dry, but Miss Marple noted the precision of his memory, a valuable asset in her reconstruction. Evelyn, emboldened by the conversation, added, Ronald was odd that night. He was all smiles early on, flirting with everyone, but after midnight he got moody. I saw him arguing with Sylvia in the garden before she went upstairs. It was quick, but he did something about a film role, I think. He stormed off afterward. Her voice was soft, but Miss Marple sensed a flicker of satisfaction, as if Evelyn relished revealing Ronald's flaws. Miss Marple nodded, her mind weaving the threads together. Sylvia upstairs at 1, whispering with Gray, arguing with Ronald. These were not random moments, but scenes in a carefully scripted night. She turned to Trent, her tone gentle but probing. "Mr. Trent, as a novelist, you must have a keen eye for detail. Did you notice anything about the bungalow itself? Perhaps a door left ajar, or a servant out of place that might suggest how a thief moved unnoticed?" Trent, flattered by the appeal to his craft, furrowed his brow. "Well, now you mention it, I did see that Medelsi is it, carrying a tray of glasses to the kitchen around 1:30. She looked flustered, kept glancing at the hall. I thought she was just tired, but it was odd, her being so jumpy when the party was quieting down." His tone was thoughtful, and Miss Marple filed away the detail, recalling Elsie's fear and her admission of cleaning the window frame. Mrs. Bantry, unable to resist, pressed Evelyn, "And you, dear, any servants acting strangely, or guests, for that matter? Jane loves these little tidbits." Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening on her napkin. I saw Harris, the butler, near the study, just after Sylvia and Gray went in. He was polishing a tray, but it seemed like he was listening, standing closer than he needed to. I didn't think much of it, he's so proper, but it was late for polishing, wasn't it?" Her voice trembled, and Miss Marple noted her unease, a sign she feared overstepping. Dr. Hayworth, his gaze steady, added, "Harris was everywhere that night, silent as a shadow. I noticed him in the hall when I left, checking the garden gate key on its hook. It was 2, maybe a bit later. He seemed watchful, more than usual for a butler winding down a party. His observation was clinical, and Miss Marple sensed his reliability. A man who missed little. The tea progressed, the guests relaxing under Dolly's warmth and Miss Marple's gentle questions. She drew out more details. Trent recalled a guest spilling wine on the drawing-room rug, distracting the servants. Evelyn mentioned Clara Morton's absence from the dance floor after midnight, likely in the library. Hayworth noted the gramophone's sudden silence around 1, a lull that might have exposed any noise from upstairs. Each fragment, small but vivid, added to Miss Marple's mental map of the night, a mosaic of movements and motives. As the guests prepared to leave, Miss Marple lingered, her umbrella tapping the floor as she thanked Dolly for the gathering. "You've a gift for hospitality, Dolly," she said, her eyes twinkling, "and for drawing out secrets. These accounts are most valuable. They light the corners of that night." Mrs. Bantry, flushed with pride, pressed for more. "Jane, you're on to something, I know it." Sylvia upstairs, Gray whispering, Ronald sulking, "It's all connected, isn't it? And Harris, always watching, what's he hiding?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her thoughts were a quiet whirl. Connections, Dolly, are like stitches. They hold the pattern together, but only if we see the whole. The party was a stage, and each player had a role. We must find the script they followed. She declined a lift back to St. Mary Mead, choosing instead to walk, the evening air clearing her mind as she pieced together the new clues. Sylvia's movements upstairs at 1, whispering with Gray, arguing with Ronald, suggested a woman orchestrating more than a party. Gray's private conference, so late in the evening, hinted at a shared secret, perhaps tied to the insurance claim. Ronald's tension, his argument over a role, pointed to his dependence on Sylvia, a motive for complicity or resentment. Harris's vigilance, his proximity to the study and the gate key, suggested he saw more than he admitted, while Elsie's flustered state hinted at her involvement, however unwitting. The party's secrets, Miss Marple felt, were a web of half-truths, and she needed one more thread to unravel them. The next day, Miss Marple visited the bungalow. Using the pretext of inquiring about the gala to speak with Harris, she found him in the hall, polishing silver with a precision that bordered on ritual. "Mr. Harris," she said, her tone grandmotherly, "you must be exhausted managing such a lively house. The night of the party, I understand, was particularly hectic. Did you have a moment to notice Miss Vane's movements, or perhaps Mr. Gray's?" Harris's hands paused, his eyes meeting hers with a guarded calm. Miss Vane was the hostess. Mamma was about, charming the guests. Mr. Gray left early, as I recall, though he was back the next day. I was busy with my duties, not watching anyone in particular. His voice was steady, but Miss Marple noted a slight tightening of his fingers, a sign of caution. She nodded, her smile reassuring. "Of course, but a butler sees much, even in passing." "I heard you found a key under Miss Vane's bed the morning after the theft. A curious place for it to fall, don't you think?" Harris's expression flickered, a rare crack in his composure. Yes, ma'am. I found it while sweeping. Miss Vane said it must have been knocked there during the theft. I gave it to her straight away." His tone was measured, but Miss Marple sensed a reluctance, as if he doubted his own words. She thanked him and withdrew, her thoughts turning to the key. Sylvia's claim that it had been lost in the thief's haste, only to be found by Harris, was too convenient a prop in her narrative. Miss Marple recalled the windows silent, hinges tested during her last visit. They squeaked faintly when forced, a detail she'd noted but not mentioned to Crane. A thief entering silently would need to know the window's quirks, or have opened it from within. The key, the footprints, the wiped frame, they were all parts of a staged scene. And Harris's discovery suggested he was either complicit or manipulated. Back at St. Mary Mead, over a quiet supper, Miss Marple reviewed her findings. The party's secret, Sylvia's absence, Gray's whispers, Ronald's mood. Harris's watchfulness pointed to a conspiracy, with Sylvia as its architect. Yet, the details, so carefully gathered, needed one final connection to reveal the whole. She resolved to attend Sylvia's gala, where the players would gather again, their guards lowered by champagne and spectacle. There she felt the party's secrets would finally speak. Mrs. Bantry. Visiting the next morning was alight with anticipation. Jane, the galas tomorrow. Sylvia's invited half the county, and Ronald's performing. You'll be there, won't you? I know you're close to cracking those party details. They're the key, aren't they? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her smile serene. The key, Dolly, is in the moments no one meant to reveal. The party was a masquerade, and its secrets are its mask. At the gala, I think, the mask will slip, and we shall see the face beneath. Her voice was calm, but her mind was a quiet whirl of anticipation, ready to seize the final clue that would unravel the riverside bungalow's tangled tale. Chapter 10. The Actress's Gambit. The evening air was warm and fragrant with the scent of roses as Miss Jane Marple arrived at the riverside bungalow for Sylvia Vane's much-anticipated charity gala. The glass-walled house glowed like a lantern against the deepening twilight, its lawn adorned with fairy lights and tables draped in white linen. Guests in evening dress mingled under a marquee, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Miss Marple, in a simple black gown and her trusty hat, moved through the crowd with the unobtrusive grace of a shadow, her pale blue eyes sharp behind their mild expression. The gala, she knew, was more than a spectacle. It was the final act in the drama of the stolen sapphires. and she was determined to see the curtain fall on truth. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, resplendent in emerald silk, had insisted on their attendance. Her enthusiasm for the event matched only by her faith in Miss Marple's sleuthing. "Jane," she had said in the car, her eyes gleaming, "this is it. Sylvia's got everyone here, Ronald, Clara, Gray, even Sir Henry. You're going to catch her out, aren't you? I can feel it." Miss Marple, ever cautious, had smiled faintly, her thoughts focused on the web of clues she had woven, the smudged footprints, the wiped window frame, Sylvia's late-night pacing, Gray's nervous complicity, and Harris's guarded discoveries. Tonight, she felt, the players would reveal their hands, whether they meant to or not. The bungalow's drawing room was a hive of activity, its glass walls reflecting the glitter of jewels and the flicker of candlelight. Sylvia Vane, the evening's star, moved among her guests with practiced elegance, her sapphire blue gown a deliberate echo of her lost treasures. Her auburn hair was swept into an intricate chignon, and her smile was radiant, though Miss Marple noted a faint tension in her posture, like a string pulled taut. The actress's performance was flawless, but Miss Marple, with her knack for seeing through artifice, sensed the strain beneath the polish. Ronald Blake, in a tailored tuxedo, was the picture of charm, his dark hair gleaming as he entertained. A cluster of admirers with tales of film stunts, yet his eyes followed Sylvia, a mix of devotion and unease that Miss Marple found telling. Clara Morton, in a stark black dress, stood apart, her sharp features set in a smirk as she sipped champagne and watched Sylvia's every move. Mr. Percival, Gray, his spectacles slipping down his nose, hovered near the piano, his nervous energy undimmed by the festive mood. Sir Henry Clithering, robust and observant, mingled with the gentry, his shrewd gaze occasionally meeting Miss Marple's with a nod of mutual understanding. Inspector Crane, invited as a courtesy, stood stiffly by the door, his moustache twitching. As he scanned the crowd, Mrs. Bantry, clutching a glass of champagne, whispered to Miss Marple, "Look at them all, Jane. Sylvia's the queen bee, and they're buzzing around her, or plotting against her. What's your plan? Are you going to spring something on them?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, her umbrella tucked under her arm like a scepter. "A plan, Dolly, is like a stitchet, must be placed with care. Tonight we observe, we listen, and we wait for the moment the mask slips. The truth, you see, is impatient, it will show itself." Her voice was soft, but her mind was a whirl of connections, ready to seize the final thread that would unravel the theft's deception. The gala's program began with a speech from Sylvia, delivered from a small dais in the marquee. Her voice, clear and emotive, carried over the crowd, drawing gasps and murmurs. "My dear friends," she said, her hands clasped, "your support in this trying time has been my strength. The loss of my sapphires is a wound, but this gala, for charity and hope, is my answer to despair. I believe my jewels will be found, and with your help we shall shine a light on the truth." Her eyes glistened, and the crowd applauded, though Miss Marple noted the reporter from the Much Benham Gazette scribbling furiously, ensuring Sylvia's words would dominate tomorrow's headlines. Ronald's performance followed, a dramatic scene from their latest film, played with Sylvia on a makeshift stage. Their chemistry was electric, but Miss Marple observed Ronald's occasional glances to the crowd, as if seeking approval, and Sylvia's subtle corrections, a director guiding her star. The applause was thunderous, but Miss Marple's attention was drawn to Clara, whose smirk had hardened into a scowl, and Gray, who clapped mechanically, his fingers trembling. After the performance, Miss Marple slipped away from the marquee, her steps slow but purposeful as she entered the bungalow. The drawing room was quieter now, the servants busy with trays of canaps. She found Elsie in the hall, polishing a silver candlestick with nervous haste. "Elsie, my dear," Miss Marple said, her tone grandmotherly, "you must be run off. Your feet with this gala? I wonder, on the night of the theft, did you notice Miss Vane with anyone unusual perhaps near the study or upstairs?" Elsie's hands froze, her pale face flushing. I told you, ma'am, I saw her pacing around one. She was alone, far as I know. I didn't see no one else upstairs, honest." Her voice trembled, and Miss Marple noted the way her eyes darted to the drawing room, where Sylvia was holding court. Miss Marple patted her arm, her touch reassuring. "Of course, my dear, but a house like this, so open, must make secrets hard to keep. Did you hear anything, perhaps a noise from the bedroom that night?" Elsie shook her head, her lips tight, and Miss Marple let her go, sensing the girl's fear was a barrier she couldn't yet breach. Harris, passing with a tray, caught Miss Marple's eye. She seized the moment, her voice soft but probing. "Mr. Harris, you found the jewel case key under Miss Vane's bed, I believe. A curious place, don't you think? Did you notice anything else in the room that morning? Perhaps something out of place?" Harris's expression remained stoic, but his fingers tightened on the tray. "The key was there, ma'am, as I said. The room was a bit askew, a chair moved, but I thought it was the thief's doing. I reported it to Miss Vane and the police." His tone was measured, but Miss Marple sensed a hesitation, as if he were choosing his words with care. She nodded, her smile gentle. "You're very thorough, Mr. Harris. A butler's eye, Mrs. Little, I imagine." "Thank you." As he moved off, Miss Marple filed away his response, her thoughts turning to the key's convenient discovery and the room's subtle disarray. Signs of a scene arranged rather than disturbed. Returning to the marquee, Miss Marple found Sylvia surrounded by admirers, her laughter bright but her eyes wary. Miss Marple approached, her demeanour unassuming. "Miss Vane, what a splendid evening," she said, her voice warm. "Your resilience is inspiring. I wonder, during the party, did you check your jewels before retiring? It's such a habit with precious things." Sylvia's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Check them? Oh yes. I glanced at the case before bed, to be sure they were safe. I locked it, as always, and put the key beside it. If only I'd been more careful." Her voice caught, but Miss Marple noted the rehearsed quality, like a line delivered too often. Miss Marple nodded, her gaze steady. "How prudent. And the window, did you notice it opened before you slept?" Sylvia's fingers brushed her necklace. A nervous gesture, and she admitted it had been closed, as far as she knew. Miss Marple thanked her and withdrew, her thoughts racing. Sylvia's answers, so polished, were at odds with Elsie's account of her pacing and the guest's sightings of her with Gray. The evening progressed with dancing and toasts, but Miss Marple's focus was on the key players. She cornered Ronald near the bar, his charm dimmed by a glass too many. "Mr. Blake," she said, her tone gentle, "you were so gallant at the party, helping guests to their taxis. Did you see Miss Vane after midnight, perhaps ensuring all was well?" Ronald's smile was strained, his eyes flicking to Sylvia across the lawn. "After midnight, I was busy, Miss Marple playing host, you know. I saw Sylvia earlier in the garden, but not later. She was preoccupied, I guess." His voice held a note of bitterness, and Miss Marple recalled Evelyn's account of their argument. A clue to his resentment. Clara approached near the jetty, was less guarded, her champagne loosening her tongue. Miss Morton, Miss Marple said, your plays are so perceptive of human nature. Did you observe anything at the party, perhaps a tension among the guests, that might explain the theft? Clara's laugh was sharp, her eyes glinting. Tension? The whole night was a powder keg. Sylvia was lording it over everyone. Ronald was sulking, and Gray was skulking like a rat. I stayed in the library, avoiding their nonsense, but I saw Sylvia slip into the study with Gray scheming, no doubt. She's no victim, Miss Marple. She's a puppeteer. Her words were venomous, and Miss Marple noted the depth of her grudge. A motive in itself. Gray, found by the piano, was the most evasive. Mr. Gray, Miss Marple said, her voice soft, your dedication to Miss Vane's claim is admirable. Did you discuss it with her during the party, perhaps in the study, as some guests recall? Gray's spectacles slipped, and he pushed them up with a trembling hand. The study, no, just a quick word about logistics. Nothing important. I left early, as I told the police. His voice was tight, and Miss Marple sensed a lie, confirmed by the guests' accounts of his late-night talk with Sylvia. As the gala neared its climax, Miss Marple requested a private word with Inspector Crane and Sir Henry, arranging for Sylvia, Ronald, Clara, Gray, Harris, and Elsie to join them in the bungalow's study. The room, lined with books and lit by a single lamp, was a stark contrast to the gala's glitter, its intimacy suited to revelation. Miss Marple, standing by the desk with her umbrella, began with the air of an elderly aunt sharing a story. My dear friends, she said, her voice gentle but firm, this theft has puzzled us all, but its solution lies in the details we've overlooked. Let us consider the footprints smudged, shallow, too deliberate for a thief in flight. They were made with care, not haste, to suggest an intruder who never existed. Her eyes met Sylvia's, who stiffened, her smile frozen. She continued, her tone measured. The window, wiped clean by Elsie on Miss Vane's orders, bore no marks of entry, and its hinges, silent when opened slowly, would squeak if forced. A thief from outside would have left traces, but there were none. The key, found under the bed by Harris, was not lost but placed a prop in a staged scene. Harris shifted, his stoic mask slipping, while Elsie's eyes widened in fear. Miss Marple's gaze swept the room. Miss Vane, you did not retire at midnight, as you claimed. Guests saw you upstairs at 1, whispering with Mr. Gray, arguing with Mr. Blake. You were awake, orchestrating the theft not of your sapphires, but of the truth. You hid the jewels, likely in this house, to claim the insurance and fuel your publicity, the gala, the reward, the headlines, all part of your gambit. Sylvia laughed, a brittle sound, her hands clasping her gown. Miss Marple, this is absurd. I'm the victim, here my sapphires are gone. You've no proof of these wild accusations. Miss Marple's smile was calm, her voice unwavering. Proof, Miss Vane, is in the pattern. Mr. Gray, your firm's financial straits made you complicit. You pushed the policy increase, knowing a swift payout would secure your cut, or perhaps Sylvia's favor. But your nervousness betrayed you. Gray's face paled, his spectacles glinting as he stammered a denial. She turned to Ronald, her gaze steady. Mr. Blake, your ambition bound you to Sylvia, but your resentment grew. You smeared the footprints. At her request, believing it a prank to boost her fame, unaware she meant to claim the insurance. Your argument that night was about her control, wasn't it? Ronald flushed, his fists clenching, but he said nothing, his silence damning. Clara, watching with a smirk, interjected, I told you, Miss Marple Sylvia's a schemer, but I had no part in this farce. Miss Marple nodded, acknowledging her distance but noting her satisfaction at Sylvia's exposure. Miss Marple's final words were for Sylvia. The sapphires, I suspect, are hidden in a place you could discover later, perhaps a book, a vase, a secret drawer. The police, I'm sure, will search thoroughly. She gestured to Crane, who nodded, his face red with realization. Sylvia's composure cracked, her eyes darting to Ronald, then grey. This is nonsense. I've done nothing but suffer. But her voice shook, and Miss Marple's steady gaze held her unyielding. Crane stepped forward, his tone gruff. Miss Vane, we'll need to search the house. If Miss Marple's right, we'll find those jewels. And you'll have some explaining to do. Sylvia's shoulders slumped, her mask slipping as the crowd outside continued to revel, unaware of the drama within. Mrs. Bantry, gripping Miss Marple's arm, whispered, Jane, you're a marvel. You've got her cornered. How did you know? Miss Marple's smile was serene, her thoughts already turning to the denouement. The actress's gambit, Dolly, is to dazzle, but the truth is a quiet thing. It speaks in footprints, in keys, in whispered secrets. We only needed to listen. As the study filled with the rustle of Crane's orders, Miss Marple stepped back, her work done, the stage set for the final revelation. Chapter 11. The confession. The air in the riverside bungalow's study was thick with tension. The soft glow of the single lamp casting long shadows across the bookshelves and the faces of those gathered within. Miss Jane Marple stood by the desk, her slight figure unassuming yet commanding, her black umbrella resting against her side like a silent ally. The gala's music and laughter drifted faintly from the marquee outside, a stark contrast to the charged silence that had fallen over the room. Sylvia Vane, her sapphire blue gown shimmering in the dim light, stood rigid, her composure fraying as Miss Marple's gentle but relentless accusations laid bare the deception of the stolen sapphires. Ronald Blake, Mr. Percival Gray, Clara Morton, Harris the butler, Elsie the maid, Inspector Crane, Sir Henry Clithering, and Mrs. Dolly Bantry formed a semicircle, their eyes fixed on Sylvia, whose mask of victimhood was slipping under the weight of truth. Miss Marple's voice, soft but unwavering, resumed where she had left off, her pale blue eyes holding Sylvia's with a quiet intensity that brooked no escape. Miss Vane, she said, your performance has been remarkable, but the stage is a cruel critic. The footprints, so carefully smeared, the window wiped clean, the key conveniently found, these were not the work of a thief, but of a director. You orchestrated this theft, not for loss, but for gain. The insurance money to salvage your career, the publicity to burnish your name. The sapphires, I believe, are still in this house, hidden where you could retrieve them for a triumphant encore. Sylvia's laugh was sharp, almost desperate, her hands clutching the edge of a chair for support. Miss Marple, this is preposterous. I'm the victim here. My jewels were stolen, my privacy violated. You've no evidence, only wild guesses. I demand you stop this nonsense at once. Her voice rose, theatrical in its indignation, but her eyes darted to Ronald, then Gray, as if seeking an ally in her crumbling narrative. Inspector Crane, his ruddy face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and resolve, stepped forward, his notebook clutched tightly. "Miss Vane, I'll need to search the house, as Miss Marple suggests. If those sapphires are here, we'll find them, and if they are, you'll have questions to answer." His tone was gruff, but Miss Marple noted a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, as if he recognized the clarity she had brought to his muddled case. Mrs. Bantry, gripping Miss Marple's arm, whispered excitedly, "Jane, you've done it." She's cornered. Look at her. "But where are the jewels?" "You said a book or a vase do, you know where." Miss Marple's smile was faint, her voice low. "Patience, Dolly. The truth is like a loose thread pulled gently, and it unravels. Let us see how Miss Vane responds." Her gaze returned to Sylvia, whose face had paled beneath its careful makeup, her lips trembling as she struggled to maintain her poise. Ronald Blake, his charm replaced by a sullen flush, broke the silence, his voice tight with betrayal. "Sylvia, is this true? Did you use me? You asked me to smudge those footprints, said it was a lark, a publicity stunt to boost the film. I thought you were joking." His fists clenched, and Miss Marple noted the raw edge of his anger. A young man who had trusted too blindly in his star's promises. Sylvia's eyes widened, her composure cracking like thin ice. "Ronald, don't be absurd. I never miss. Marple's twisting everything. I asked you to tidy the room, that's all. You're confused." Her voice faltered, and Miss Marple saw the desperation in her glance toward Grey, who had shrunk into the corner, his spectacles glinting as he avoided her gaze. Miss Marple's tone remained gentle, but her words were precise, each one a needle, piercing the fabric of Sylvia's lies. "Mr. Blake, you were loyal but misled. You believed Miss Vane's lark was harmless, a boost for your shared fame. But the footprints were no prank, they were a deception, meant to point to Anne. Intruder who never existed. Miss Vane needed a partner, someone close enough to trust, yet pliable enough to manipulate. You were that partner, weren't you?" Ronald's face reddened, his voice rising. "I didn't know about the insurance. She said it was just a stunt to get the papers talking. I smeared the mud, yes, but I didn't touch the jewels, I swear. It." His eyes met Sylvia's, a mix of hurt and fury, and Miss Marple noted the crack in their alliance. A fracture that would widen under pressure. Clara Morton, her sharp features alight with vindictive satisfaction, laughed coldly. "Oh, Sylvia, what a performance. You played Ronald like a fiddle, didn't you? And me, I knew you were scheming, but this, staging a theft for money and headlines, it's low, even for you." Her words dripped with contempt, and Miss Marple observed the depth of her rivalry, a motive that had kept her on the sidelines, but sharpened. Sylvia's hands flew to her face, her voice rising in a crescendo of denial. "This is outrageous. Clara, you've always hated me, but to accuse me of this, I've lost everything, my sapphires, my peace. Miss Marple, you're a cruel old woman, spinning tales with no proof." Her tears were convincing, but Miss Marple noted their timing, too perfect for genuine grief. Sir Henry Clithering, who had been listening with quiet intensity, leaned forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Miss Vane, Miss Marple's reasoning is sound. The footprints, the window, the key all point to a staged crime. If the sapphires are here, as she suggests, their discovery would confirm her theory. Will you consent to a search, or shall we wait for a warrant?" Sylvia's shoulders slumped, her defiance wavering under Sir Henry's steady gaze. She glanced at Grey, who was now visibly trembling, his spectacles slipping as he clutched a chair. "Percival," she said, her voice low and pleading. Tell them it's not true. Tell them you checked the policy, that it was all above board. Gray's face was ashen, his voice barely a whisper. Sylvia, I did what you asked. The policy increase, the quick settlement, it was your idea. You said it would save us both, that the firm could handle it. But I didn't know you'd hide the jewels. His words tumbled out, a confession driven by panic, and Miss Marple noted the relief in his eyes, as if the burden of silence had been too heavy. Sylvia's cry was sharp, almost theatrical, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Percival, how dare you? I never miss Marple. He's lying to save himself. I'm innocent. Her voice broke, and she sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. The picture of a defeated heroine. Miss Marple's expression remained serene, her voice soft, but unyielding. Mr. Gray, you were under great strain, were you not? Your firm Marchmont and Sons faced ruin, and Miss Vane's claim offered a way out, perhaps a share of the payout, or her continued patronage. You met her in the study that night as guests, saw to finalize the plan. But you were uneasy, knowing the risk. Is that not so? Gray's shoulders sagged, his spectacles falling to the desk with a clatter. Yes, he whispered, his voice breaking. She came to me weeks ago, said her career was slipping, that the film was failing. She needed the money, and my firm was desperate. We agreed to increase the policy, stage the theft, split the payout. She hid the sapphires, I don't know where. I just wanted to save the firm. His confession hung in the air, a stark admission that silenced the room. Inspector Crane, his face red with a mix of triumph and chagrin, turned to Sylvia. Miss Vane, where are the sapphires? If you tell us now, it'll go easier for you. We'll search regardless, but cooperation might help your case. Sylvia's hands dropped, her face pale but defiant. You'll find nothing, she said, her voice low. I've done nothing wrong. Search if you must, but you're wasting your time. Her words were bold, but Miss Marple noted the tremble in her fingers, the way her eyes avoided the bookshelves behind the desk. Miss Marple stepped forward, her umbrella tapping the floor like a metronome. Inspector, if I may suggest, the study is a likely place to start. Miss Vane is fond of books. Her collection is quite extensive. A hollowed volume, perhaps, would be a clever hiding place, easily overlooked yet close at hand. Her tone was gentle, but her gaze was fixed on Sylvia, who flinched as if struck. Crane nodded, signaling to a constable. Right, let's have a look. Start with the shelves, check every book. The constable moved to the bookshelves, pulling volumes with careful haste. Sylvia's breathing quickened, her eyes darting to a particular shelf, and Miss Marple noted the movement, a silent confirmation of her guess. Within minutes, the constable held up a thick volume of Shakespeare, its cover worn but intact. He opened it, revealing a hollowed compartment where a velvet pouch nestled. He tipped it out, and the sapphires spilled onto the desk, their blue fire catching the lamplight. The room gasped, and Sylvia's face crumpled, her defiance collapsing into despair. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I only meant to borrow the money to save my career. The film was failing. My contract was at risk. I was going to return them, I swear. Her confession, raw and unscripted, was the first genuine note Miss Marple had heard from her, a stark contrast to her earlier theatrics. Ronald, his face a mask of betrayal, stepped back. You used me, Sylvia. You let me think it was a game, And now I'm in it with you. How could you?" His voice cracked, and Miss Marple saw the pain of a young man whose loyalty had been exploited. Gray, slumped in his chair, muttered, "I didn't know about the book. She told me they were safe, that we'd find them later. I just wanted to keep the firm afloat." His admission was weary, a man defeated by his own choices. Clara, her smirk triumphant, crossed her arms. "I knew it, Sylvia. You're no star, just a fraud with a flair for drama. You deserve this." Her words were harsh, but Miss Marple noted a flicker of pity in her eyes. A rival who had won but found no joy in it. Harris and Elsie stood silent, their roles as unwitting witnesses confirmed. Harris's stoic mask had softened, his loyalty to Sylvia tempered by the truth, while Elsie's eyes were wide with relief, as if a burden had been lifted. Sir Henry, watching with quiet approval, nodded to Miss Marple, a silent acknowledgement of her skill. Crane, seizing the sapphires, turned to Sylvia. "Miss Vane, you're coming to the station. Mr. Gray, Mr. Blake, you too. We'll sort out the charges: fraud, conspiracy, the lot. Miss Marple, I don't know how you did it, but we're in your debt." His tone was grudging, but his eyes held respect, a rare concession from a man who preferred his own methods. Mrs. Bantry, practically bouncing with excitement, clutched Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, you're a marvel. You found the sapphires, broke Sylvia, and got them all confessing. How did you know about the book?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, her voice soft. "A book, Dolly, is a natural hiding place for someone who loves the stage. Sylvia's life is a performance, and the sapphires were her props, kept close for the final act. The truth, you see, is in the small things, the glances, the hesitations, the places we think safe." Her eyes twinkled, her thoughts already turning to the quiet of St. Mary Mead, where her knitting awaited as Crane led Sylvia, Ronald, and Gray from the study. The gala's music swelled outside, oblivious to the drama within. Sylvia's head was bowed, her glamour dimmed by defeat, while Ronald's shoulders slumped, his charm extinguished. Gray, clutching his spectacles, followed like a man in a trance. The guests, still dancing under the fairy lights, would read of the scandal in tomorrow's papers, and Sylvia's star, Miss Marple knew, would fade under its weight. Sir Henry, lingering, offered Miss Marple a warm smile. "You've a rare gift, Miss Marple. Scotland Yard could use you. Ever thought of consulting for us?" Miss Marple's laugh was soft, almost girlish. "Oh, Sir Henry, I'm just an old lady who notices things. My place is here, with my garden and my knitting, but I'm glad to have helped in my small way." Her humility was genuine, but her eyes sparkled with the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved, as she and Mrs. Bantry stepped into the night. The river's silver gleam reflecting the stars. Dolly was alight with questions. "Jane, you're impossible. How did you know it was Sylvia from the start? And that book pure genius? What's next?" Another case. Miss Marple's umbrella tapped the path, her gaze on the horizon. "Next, Dolly, is a quiet evening at home. The confession is made, the sapphires found. But human nature, you know, is never quieted. We'll bring another puzzle in time." Her voice was calm, but her mind was already alert, ready for the next thread to unravel in the tapestry of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 12. The curtain falls. The soft light of a late summer morning filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead, casting delicate patterns across the polished floor of her parlour. She sat in her favourite armchair by the window, her knitting needles clicking with a gentle rhythm that matched the quiet pulse of the village beyond. The roses in her garden, still vibrant despite the season's turn, nodded in the breeze, and the distant clatter of a milk cart was the only sound to break the stillness. The scandal at the riverside bungalow, which had set tongues wagging from Much Benham to the village green, was drawing to a close, its secrets laid bare by Miss Marple's quiet persistence. The sapphires had been found, Sylvia Vane's deception exposed, and the players in her theatrical gambitronal Blake, Mr. Percival Gray, and even the silent witnesses, Harris and Elsie, had faced the consequences of their roles. Yet Miss Marple, with her keen understanding of human nature, knew that the final act was as much about reflection as revelation. Her maid, Florence, bustled in with a tray of tea, her cheeks flushed with the latest gossip gleaned from the butcher's shop. "Oh, miss, it's all anyone can talk about," she exclaimed, setting the tray down with a clink. "Miss Vane's gone off to London, they say, after that dreadful scene at the gala. The papers are full of it, her pictures everywhere, but not the way she wanted. And Mr. Blake, they're saying he's in trouble, but not as much as that insurance man, Mr. Gray. The whole village is buzzing." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, but Miss Marple's smile was faint, her thoughts already sifting through the aftermath of the bungalow affair. "Indeed, Florence," she said, pouring her tea with a steady hand. "It is a sad business when ambition leads to such ends. But the truth, you know, has a way of shining through, however cleverly it is hidden. What do they say of Miss Vane's departure?" Florence perched on a chair, her apron slightly askew. "Well, miss, they say she left in a hurry, no grand farewells, packed her bags and took the early train, with reporters chasing her all the way to the station. Some say she's ruined, her career in tatters. Those film people don't like a scandal, do they? And Mr. Gray's firm, it's gone under, just like you thought. He's been arrested, along with Miss Vane, for fraud or some such. Mr. Blake's in a pickle, too, but they're going easy on him, seeing as he was fooled by her." She paused, her voice dropping. "They're all saying it's you who sorted it out, miss. How you knew the jewels were in that book, I'll never understand." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her expression remained serene. "An old lady's intuition, Florence, nothing more. People, you see, are predictable. In their desires, vanity, greed, loyalty, they write their own scripts, and we need only read them carefully." She sipped her tea, her mind drifting to the gala's dramatic denouement, Sylvia's crumbling facade, Ronald's betrayed anger, Gray's broken confession, and the sapphires' gleam as they spilled from their hiding place in the hollowed Shakespeare volume. It had been a fitting end, she thought, for a drama so steeped in theatricality. Mrs. Dolly Bantry arrived shortly after, her tweed coat flung open, and her face alight with the thrill of the case's resolution. She settled into a chair, waving away Florence's offer of tea with an impatient hand. "Jane, you're a miracle," she declared, her voice ringing with admiration. "The whole county's talking about you, how you outwitted Sylvia Vane and her scheming crew. I've just come from Much Benham, and the Gazette has a full spread. Sapphire stars fall, can you believe it? They're calling you a village sleuth. Tell me everything. How did you know it would end like this?" Miss Marple set her cup down, her knitting resumed as a way to steady her thoughts. "Dolly, you flatter me," she said, her voice soft but tinged with amusement. "I am no sleuth, merely an observer of human nature. The bungalow affair was a play, and Miss Vane its director. But every play has its flaws, small inconsistencies, moments of carelessness. The footprints, the window, the key, they were her props, but they told a different story to those who looked closely. Dolly leaned forward, her eyes wide. But that book, Jane. How on earth did you guess the sapphires were in a book? And Sylvia, did you know from the start she was behind it all? Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze drifting to the garden. Not from the start, Dolly, but early on. Miss Vane's tears were too polished, her story too perfect. An actress. Lives for the stage. And her life was faltering, her film failing, her contract at risk. The insurance money was her lifeline, the publicity her oxygen. The sapphires, I suspected, were never meant to be lost forever, only hidden for a time, to be found in a blaze of glory. A book was a natural choice for someone like her, literary, dramatic, yet easily overlooked. The study, where she met Gray, was her domain, and Shakespeare, with his tales of ambition and deceit, seemed fitting. Dolly clapped her hands, delighted. Fitting, oh Jane, you're too much. And Ronald, poor boy, caught in her web. What's to become of him? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her voice measured. Mr. Blake was a pawn, Dolly, driven by ambition and loyalty. He smeared the footprints, believing it a harmless stunt, unaware of Sylvia's deeper scheme. The police, I understand, have charged him with aiding a fraud, but his candor and youth will likely earn him leniency, of fine, perhaps, or a warning. His career may suffer, but young men are resilient, especially those with charm. Her tone held a trace of sympathy, for she knew the sting of betrayal, even for one as self-serving as Ronald and Gray. Dolly pressed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. His firm's collapsed, hasn't it? All because of Sylvia's plan. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. Mr. Gray's firm, Marchmont and Sons, was already crumbling, its risks outpacing its reserves. The payout for Sylvia's claim would have been its ruin. But he saw a chance for salvation, a share of the money, perhaps, or her continued business. His complicity was born of desperation, but his confession has sealed his fate. Fraud, I believe, will carry a heavy penalty, and his firm's collapse is certain. A sad end, Dolly, for a man who thought he could outwit fate. Dolly sighed, shaking her head. And Sylvia, what a fall, from star to scandal in a week. The Gazette says she's facing charges, and her film's been shelved. Do you think she ever recover? Miss Marple's lips pursed, her thoughts turning to the actress's tearful confession in the study. Miss Vane is a creature of the spotlight, Dolly. She will try to rise again, perhaps in a new role as a penitent or a martyr. But the public is fickle, and scandal clings like damp. Her career, I fear, will not shine as it once did. The charge is conspiracy. Fraud will keep her in London's courts, not its theatres, for some time. Her voice was gentle, but there was a firmness in it, a recognition of justice's quiet inevitability. Florence, returning with a fresh pot of tea, could not resist joining the conversation. Miss, they're saying in the village that Harris, the butler, knew something all along. And Elsie, poor thing, she's gone to work for Mrs. Clements now, too scared to stay at the bungalow. Did they help Miss Vane, do you think? Miss Marple's smile was kind, her needles pausing. Harris and Elsie were witnesses, Florence, not conspirators. Harris, with his butler's eye, saw much but said little. Bound by loyalty to Miss Vane, his discovery of the key was no accident. She directed him to find it, to complete her narrative of a thief. Elsie, poor child, was merely obedient, cleaning the window frame, as instructed, unaware it erased evidence. Their silence was not guilt, but duty, and I suspect they are relieved to see the truth out. She resumed her knitting, the soft click a counterpoint to her words. Dolly, sipping her tea, leaned back with a grin. Jane, you're a marvel, the way you saw through it, all those footprints, that key, Sylvia's pacing at 1 o'clock. How do you do it? I'd have believed her tears and never thought twice about the book. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her voice soft. Human nature, Dolly, is like a garden. It grows in patterns, however wild it seems. Vanity, greed, fear, they leave their marks, as clear as footprints in soft earth. Miss Vane's pattern was one of ambition, her stage, the bungalow, her props, the sapphires. I merely watched and listened and saw where the pattern led. Her humility was genuine, but her satisfaction was evident in the quiet curve of her lips. The conversation turned to the villagers' reaction, with Florence recounting tales of the butcher's outrage and the vicar's sermon on honesty subtly. Inspired by the scandal, Dolly, ever eager for details, pressed Miss Marple for her thoughts on the case's broader lessons. Jane, there must be something profound in all this immoral about greed or deception. You always see the deeper truth. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her gaze drifting to the roses outside. The deeper truth, Dolly, is that people are their own undoing. Sylvia sought fame and fortune, but her need for control wrote her downfall. Ronald's loyalty blinded him, Gray's desperation trapped him, and even Clara's bitterness, though uninvolved, fed the drama. We all carry our flaws, and they shape our choices, for better or worse. The task is to see them clearly, in ourselves and others, and to choose wisely. Her voice was calm, but its wisdom carried the weight of years spent observing the human heart. Dolly sighed. Admiration, You're wasted in St. Mary Mead, Jane. Scotland Yard would snap you up. Sir Henry said as much, didn't he? Will you take on another case when the next scandal comes? Miss Marple's laugh was soft, almost girlish. Oh, Dolly, I am quite content here with my garden and my knitting. Scandals, you know, find their way to St. Mary Mead. They need no invitation. When the next comes, I shall be ready, with my needles and my eyes open. Her tone was light, but her gaze was sharp, already alert for the faint stirrings of the village's next puzzle. As Dolly prepared to leave, promising to return with more gossip, Miss Marple walked her to the door, her umbrella tapping the floor. The village was quiet now, the scandal's fever cooling as new concerns harvests. Weddings, petty quarrels, took its place. She returned to her parlour, settling back into her armchair, her knitting resumed. The sapphires, the bungalow, Sylvia's. Fall, they were a chapter closed, a pattern complete. Yet Miss Marple knew that human nature, with its endless complexities, would soon weave another, and she, with her quiet ways and watchful eyes, would be there to unravel it. The sun climbed higher, bathing St. Mary Mead in golden light, and Miss Marple's needles clicked on, a steady rhythm in a world of secrets waiting to be told.